Hey, what's up guys? Max here. I'm back at home right now, and I feel like the story has come to terms now that soulmates is real, and it's actually a good thing and find ourselves in the ways that you have that sense of a feeling that soulmates can be a good thing, or sometimes could be a bad thing. But when it comes to Lance and Keith, it's different. Okay, so let's get started with the new chapter for this story called The Marks We Make. And it's a Voltron fanfiction, and it's a alternate universe, the college slash soulmate alternate universe. Kind of get the story of it and what's behind where Lance and Keith are together and they're just getting along. And then after sort of what happened in the last chapter, they kissed on that last scene. We're just kind of to get that little feeling, because there's going to be lots of emotional things, a lot of deaths coming on, but you'll see. This chapter, it has some involving with, there's going to be involving with some car accidents, death, and there's some alcohol usage, and I'm going to give you guys a heads up with some mild smut. If you don't know what smut is, so you're going to see when it's up, and yeah, we should avoid everything that we have right here, because you're gonna hate me reading this chapter. It's gonna stab you in the heart, or whatever your body part is going to be stabbed. But anyways, let's just hop on into this chapter 7, and yeah. Chapter 7. Linger in Our Hearts. Lance isn't entirely sure when the whole pickup line thing started. 16, 17, late high school for sure. His soulmate had never been particularly talkative. He remembers getting notes of hesitancy and shyness even from the beginning. Lance, being Lance, had tried to jump right into it, dive right in, both feet first, take the plunge. All of his family members had amazing stories, amazing heartfelt stories worthy of fairy tales and romance novels. He just had to know if his soulmate was someone he already knew. So he had jumped right in, or at least he tried. He learned pretty quickly that his soulmate stopped responding the instant he started bringing up personal details, never answered any questions about themselves, never offered any details either. But they did respond when Lance's messages were innocent and benign. Doodles of his teachers and friends and favorite superheroes, pleas for tic-tac-toe games and hangman, talking about how he loved the snow but hated the cold, talking about his favorite shows and books, talking about his favorite foods. Those kind of details his soulmate responded to. Easy things. Things that weren't entirely personal. They talk about movies and complain about school. They didn't talk often, nor did they talk in depth. But Lance cherished each word that appeared on his skin. So he stopped asking personal questions, stopped telling personal things about himself, stopped bothering to find out a name, age, location, gender. Those things didn't matter anyway. As much as he wanted to know, desperately needed to know, those details could wait. So he stopped asking the question that burned the tip of his tongue and buzzed around in his mind like a hive of angry hornets. He learned not to bring certain subjects up. He learned the things he could and couldn't say. He learned because he didn't want his soulmate to stop talking to him. He was young, in love, and under the delusion that one day his soulmate would show up at his doorstep and sweep him off his feet. Unfortunately, life isn't a fairy tale, and things don't always go the way you imagine they will. Then the words suddenly stopped about halfway through high school. He tried to get their attention. He really did. He tried everything. Doodles, jokes, tic-tac-toe boards that remained empty until they faded. He tried asking, please, for some kind of sign, anything. He remembers how he had cried, imagining the worst. He remembers curling up on his mama's lap while she rocked him and whispered reassuring words. He had clung to the fact that he hadn't felt the last connection. He hadn't felt it break. That meant his soulmate was alive, at least. But he feared they were hurt. He was worried they rejected him. He worried. He feared. Thoughts and scenarios colliding and morphing and forming a chaos of negativity that spiraled downward in a dark abyss, making his stomach twist and his heart felt heavy. A whole month of silence. He remembers how his family had to practically force feed him that month. When the connection opened up again, it wasn't with words, but with paint. His soulmate had painted before, but not like this. Blacks, dark reds, deep blues, steel grays, shadows of purples, mixing, colliding, swiped angrily across arm and leg, not with a brush, but with hands, paint swirling, shadows growing, handprints over his eyes, smear on his cheeks, finger trails gouged down his throat, and chest in maroon paint. It came out of nowhere, from a calm to a storm. The connection remained open for an hour, paint relentlessly appearing on his skin, taking over his body. He remembers locking himself in his room, stripping off his clothes, staring down at his body. The relief of having contact with his soulmate again was so brief, because he was instantly overwhelmed by emotions that weren't his, but crashed into his chest, bounced around his rib cage, and tore him apart nonetheless. A sorrow so deep that it cuts his heart to ribbons, a despair so dark that it clouded his vision, an anger so fierce that it burned his lungs, a loss so thorough that it opened up a hole in his gut, muscles clenching around it, a heaviness so crushing that it brought him to his knees. He had sat there on his floor, vision blurred by tears that he wasn't sure were his own, as a whirlwind of emotions raged through him, tearing him apart and leaving him numb. He didn't know what had happened, could barely function enough to piece through the emotions as they folded through him, crashing and cascading and blending one into the next. It was the most intensely he had felt anything through their connection, and it felt like his heart was ripping in two. Words didn't filter through soul connections. They simply didn't. While the connection was open, feelings came through. Thoughts were translated into emotions. Those could then be deciphered by one on the other end. Some people were better at pushing specific emotions to get specific messages across, just as some were better at picking apart emotions and drawing conclusions. But in that moment, Lance could have sworn he heard words. No, not heard. Felt. He felt the words, felt them throb in his chest, pulsing with each happy beat of his chest, felt them in the way you feel a silent scream tear from your throat, felt them in a way the emotions lingered, seemed to swirl and frame one message, one thought, one idea, so strongly that Lance knew. He felt it. He heard it. He knew there was nothing else that could be, because the pain of the thought was just that strong. Come back. Stop changing. Pain, loneliness, despair. It gave way to sorrow, which gave way to reluctant acceptance, which gave way to a numbness that left him feeling hollow. The pink marks slowed gradually, lazily strokes until they stopped altogether. Their connection closed, emotions ebbing away, leaving only echoes in their wake. Lance still isn't sure how long he had sat there, feeling hollowed out and numb, unable to think, barely able to breathe, staring down at his soulmate's pain in twisted dark colors across his skin, so bright, so vibrant. They would last for days, given the intensity of his SM's emotions. Lance had tried to reach out to them a few times after that, probing questions. Are you alright? What happened? Reassurances and comforting statements. I was worried about you. I'm glad you're okay. I'm always here if you need me. No response. Stop changing. The words echoed in Lance's dreams, haunted his thoughts. Changes were happening. His soulmate was in pain, and there was nothing he could do about it. Nothing he could do to help. Nothing he could do to comfort. Nothing, except give his soulmate something that wouldn't change. He still isn't sure how he came up with the idea. It just came to him one day. It wasn't the first time he had written pickup lines to his soulmate either. It had been something he had jokingly been doing for a while, on and off, sporadically, whenever he heard a good one. But one day, he started writing one in his hand, and he never stopped. His SM never told him not to, never said anything about it, and he never got an annoyed vibe from them. So he kept going, kept doing it. His SM never liked serious things, so Lance gave him something lighthearted and playful, something every day, something he promised he would keep doing every day, something that would never change, no matter how turbulent the rest of his soulmate's life was. And he kept at it for years, until he kissed Keith for the first time and broke his silent promise for a week. A week of no pickup lines, a week of silence, a week of picking up a pen out of habit before gently setting it aside, throwing it across the room, shoving it back in his bag. And now that week is over, his guilt over kissing Keith having subsided. He sits on the edge of his bed, pen hovering over the blank skin of his palm, and trepidation buzzing through his veins. He hesitates, uncertain whether or not he should explain himself or apologize. Despite there never being an explicit arrangement, it feels like he's betrayed his soulmate with his silence. Still, they never bothered to reach out to him either, so perhaps he doesn't owe an explanation unless asked. Taking a deep breath, he puts the felt tip to his skin and writes, "You are the light in the darkness." Not cheesy, not a pun, but true all the same. He focuses on the feeling of confidence, of affection, of fondness, but it's a cheap mask for the guilt and shy hesitancy he feels churning in his gut. He finishes off with a silent apology on the tip of his mind. He leans back, staring at the words and letting his breath out in a rush. There, done, back to normal. He'll do it again tomorrow, and again the next day, because he is Lance, and this is his soulmate, and this is just who they are, a piece of their puzzle, a page of their story. He's showering when he feels the tingling sensation of his soul connection opening up, holds his hand out in front of him, ignoring the shampoo bubbles that slide down his hand, his wrist, his arm dripping off his elbow, ignores the foam sliding down his temples. He stares as the words appear on his arm, written in simple black ink, thick like a marker or a felt-tip pen. They appear with the wisp of relief. They appear with the sensation of relaxation, the ease of muscles, the breath of a sign, of tension leaking away. They appear with a breeze of distant amusement, with a vague air of fond affection, gone before Lance can really get a grasp on it, to make sure that's what he really felt, and not a trick of his imagination. Good to have you back, sunshine. Now, at the beginning of the story, Lance has that emotions, got that feeling of where he put into his soulmate's situation back at it, and he wants his soulmate to feel better, to get back into this normalcy. I think he wants to bring back the normalcy of the way it used to be, and I think that he wants to, get along with his soulmate. He wants to put into this task and just go with it, because he cares about his soulmate. Lance cares about his soulmate, and he wants this affection for his soulmate. It was really, really hard to just feel the connection of your soulmate and just written himself in his arm and sent it to one of his soulmates that he might knew or he might not. But let's just see where it goes. Rugged desert mountains, orange, reds, and browns. A sunset to cast the lightning in purples and pinks. Landscape dotted with green shrubs and scattered trees. Flowers the color of lilac and blue. Bold, sweeping brushstrokes. Delicate details. Harmonious blending of colors. Time and care. Passion and serenity. Lance feels at peace staring up at the painting. It's big, spanning across most of the wall next to Keith's bed. He's lying on his back, ass against the wall, legs crossed and popped up just below the bottom of the canvas. He stares up at it, eyes flickering across the landscape, taking everything in. He swears every time he makes another sweep, he finds something else to appreciate. Another detail, another thing that makes it unique. He never really considered himself to have an eye for art, but he thinks that after years of staring at his soulmate's paintings, he's at least learned how to appreciate it. His art history book lays open and forgotten across his stomach, hands resting easily on the pages. He's getting lost in the detailed petals of lilac and blue, adding a splash of cool colors to the otherwise warm scene, when a foot is suddenly pressing sharply into his side. "Hey!" he yelps, jerking away from the touch, head falling to the side to glare at Keith. He sits with his back to the headboard, one knee pulled up with a notebook propped up against it, other leg outstretched and hovering nearby, ready to attack him again. Lance glares at it pointedly before turning his narrowed gaze back to Keith, bottom lip pursed outward. Keith's face remains impassive as ever, unimpressed, but Lance can swear he saw a twitch at the corner of his lips. "That's not studying." Lance huffs, a sharp exhale through his nose, and rolls his eyes. "Sure it is." He rolls his head back to stare at the painting, throwing a hand up to gesture to it grandly. "I'm studying art." Another poke in his side, another squeal escaping his lips. Lance closes his textbook and playfully swats with Keith's foot, which wisely retracts, pulling up to join his other leg. "Doesn't count," he says, and this time there's definitely a small smirk hiding on his face. "Do your actual work, Lance." Lance groans, opening the book once more. He flips to the chapter he's supposed to be reviewing and holds it above his head. Blah blah, old dudes, blah blah, their art reflected the political and cultural climate of the time, blah blah, symbolism, blah blah. Research suggests that. He barely gets halfway down the page before he's groaning again. He lays the book over his face and lets his arms flop out to the side, stretch over his head, wrists and hands dangling over the edge of the bed. "Lance," he groans, "you need to study." His groan gets slightly higher pitch. "You have a test on Friday." Even higher, entering whine territory. A foot prods at his hip. He blindly swats at it. "Stop that! You told me to kick your ass if you didn't study." Lance snorts a laugh, half choking as he sucks in the air raw, giggles sounding loud in the little nook of the book on his face. "Oh my God, Keith, I didn't mean literally. If I thought you meant literally, I'd be kicking much harder." "Keith, you told me not to have mercy." "I know, but He slaps his hands over the hardcover of the book, pleased with the loud slap, ignoring the weight digs uncomfortably into his cheekbones. "We've been at this for hours. I can't focus anymore, you know." There's a pause. One that's just long enough for it to be strange, just long enough for him to notice. "Actually," he trails off, sounding his usual flavor of blank and indifferent, but with a strange note of innocent confusion that reminds Lance, too much like a puppy. I don't. He pulls the book down to his chest, turning his head to glance at Keith. He's regarding him with curious eyes, face open, expression relaxed. Lance's heart does this annoying little squeeze. He ignores it. Instead of focusing on making his face as blank and incredulous as possible, he raises one eyebrow. Seriously? Keith shrugs, eyes turning down toward his notebook, pen idly tapping against the pages. Lance gets a little caught up in how his hair falls over his forehead, which is a stupid thing to notice. Focus, Lance. When I decide to do something, I kinda just get really stuck in it. Like, if I tell myself to do it, and I start, I can't stop until it's finished. He says it offhandedly, as he can, but there's that slight pout to his lips, that weird note in his voice that Lance has trouble explaining but knows it means that Keith is getting self-conscious. Lance nods, slow and understanding, blinks slowly and turns his head back to stare at the painting. Hyper-focusing. What? Hyper-focusing. I can do that sometimes, but it's gonna be something I'm really into. It's definitely never been schoolwork. He folds one arm, resting his hand beneath his head. Man, that sounds great though. I bet it makes school super easy. I guess. Lance glances sideways at him, at the way Keith's pen is scratching aimlessly on the page, eyes glued to the spot, slight pinch to his brows. There's a story there somewhere, Kogani. Keith looks up at him, without lifting his chin, effectively glaring through his lashes and the curtain of his fringe. Lance hates how it makes his stomach go all bubbly. He holds Keith's gaze until Keith sighs. He straightens, leaning his head back against the headboard. There's a reason I went to community college before this. And that reason is... Keith shrugs. Like I said, when I decide to do something, I'll do it until I'm finished. But I didn't always decide I wanted to do schoolwork. Lance nods. High school problems? Keith laughs, abrupt and bitter, wry with dry amusement. You can say that. We've all been there. High school sucked, but that doesn't matter because you're here now. He flashes a grin, watching as Keith's eyes drift down to him, as his lips slowly tugging up into a mirrored smile. Yeah, I guess so. Anyway, he says, picking up his book and closing it to the reciting dome. Point is, my brain can't focus on one thing like this for too long. Like, words stop making sense, kind of being unable to focus. So, he sets his book aside, grinning as he passes the space next to him. We should take a short break. He doesn't question it. Doesn't complain that Lance is forcing him to take a break too. Doesn't contradict Lance's logic. It doesn't try to argue with him. He just rolls his eyes, a small smile tugging playfully at his lips as he sets his notebook aside. He moves then, scooting and shifting until he is lying on his back next to Lance. Toes near the wall, knees pulled up, hands resting loosely over his stomach. He turns his head to look at Lance, and this little traitor's thrill shoots through him, just as it always does when Keith ends up close to him. When he can feel Keith's breath vaguely brush his cheeks. Their shoulders are pressed together, just lightly, just barely, but it feels like his entire arm is on fire. So, what now? He asks, voice low, oddly breathless, just an edge of husky. His eyes look shy, even as his smirk is playful. This boy is going to be the death of him. Lance knows he can kiss him. That's a reality. They agreed that they can kiss each other, that they both want it. But it still feels like a dream. They haven't done so since their conversation and a brief makeout session at the Parkway Overlook a week ago. Sometimes Lance can barely believe that it was real, that it happened, that Keith actually agreed to have a weird friends with benefits pre-Soulmate's relationship with him, that he agreed to have one with Keith. They haven't talked about it since, haven't kissed, just shy touches and glances and standing or sitting a little closer than what was strictly called for. Lance knows he can't kiss Keith, and truth be told, and he really wants to. But when faced with Keith, eyes lidded, gazing at him through his lashes, hair falling messily over his forehead, lips looking relaxed and soft and oh so inviting, Lance panics. He turns his head away, already regretting it as he does so. His eyes settle on the painting, and suddenly he's blurting out, "Now, you should tell me about this painting," complete with wide hand gestures. Great, smooth. Good job, Lance. Why? Keith sounds disgruntled, surprised. Lance glances sideways, and yup, that's not a happy Keith face. That's a pouty Keith face, which is admittedly just as cute, but that's not the point. Lance shrugs, using the motion to playfully bump Keith's arm. He's already started this, so I might as well carry on through. Come on, dude. It's the only thing you have on your walls. There's gonna be some reason for that. Did you paint it? No. There's something in Keith's voice that he can't identify. Something different. Lance turns to look at him, only to find his eyes on the painting. There is a softness around his mouth, the ghost of a smile that he doesn't seem to realize is there. It contradicts the lines and shadows around his eyes. My mom did. Is she an artist? He nods, just barely, expression unwavering. She was. Oh. 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 This is the last painting she did. It's beautiful, he says, voice sharp and low, soft, sincere. Keith hums. What's it of? Texas. Lance can't help the small snort of amusement. Keith looks at him then, one eyebrow quirked. Lance tries to hide his small smile. He really does. Why Texas? I was born there. He finally loses the fight with his smile. You were raised in Texas? Keith's smile widens by just a fraction. Lance can see in his eyes, chasing away the shadows. Not raised, just born. He turns back to the painting, eyes softening further. She always said that the desert mountains were beautiful. Lance hums, not feeling the need to add a vocal affirmative. Keith doesn't seem to mind. They lay there in silence for several moments more, both of their eyes on the painting, both their thoughts elsewhere. But eventually, Lance's curiosity gets the best of him. This is the most open Keith has ever been about his family. And well, Lance wants to know more. Wants to know more about Keith, his life, where he came from. He chalks it up to being curious about all his friends and leave it at that. So, he tries off, leaning to the side to push into Keith's arm. Keeps his voice low, soft, careful. How did she? He doesn't know if he could ask it, but there it is, out in the open, but incomplete. An open door, an opportunity. He doesn't push, just leaves it there for Keith to pick up if he wants to. He sighs, legs tilting to the side until they fall, landing atop Lance's. Half twisted, he tilts his head to rest against Lance's shoulder. When he speaks, it's in a mumble. Car accident. Lance hums, tilting his head to rest his cheek atop Keith's. His hair is stupidly soft for someone who doesn't do with it. Lance would be jealous, but hey, he gets to enjoy it. So, was that the same accident with Shiro? He asked it hesitantly, fitting pieces of a puzzle together. Keith nods affectionately, rubbing his cheek against Lance's shoulder. It's adorable. Yeah, we lost both of our parents. I'm sorry. Thanks. Must have been hard. There's no patronizing in his tone, no pity, just sympathy, just a soft sorrow for what Keith had to go through. He reaches out a hand, and Keith meets him halfway, loosely curling their fingers together. It was, Keith says softly. There's an ache in his voice, a strain that tugs at Lance's heart. I had to live with my grandparents. Shiro was already a legal adult and on his own, but my grandparents kept a room for him anyway, treating him like family even after our parents were gone. Your grandparents? Not Shiro's? Or stepbrothers? My mom married his dad, but Shiro's still family. He'll always be family. There's a vulnerable conviction there. Something deep and emotional that's being covered by a desperate attempt in nonchalance. It's a mask so close to breaking, showing signs of fissures but holding firm. If he goes off of what he's heard from Laura, Shiro's car accident was a while ago. 6 years? 7? 8? It's been a while. Keats had plenty of time to move on, but wounds like that don't heal completely. Not really. They'll always be a little raw. There'll always be times when the scars ache. Moving on doesn't mean forgetting. Were they soulmates? He's not sure why he asked it. Just goes with his gut, follows the train of thought before it escapes him. Keith's life seems confusing, mismatched. He just wants to understand. There's a hesitation, but then a soft whisper in olive font. Yeah, yeah, they were. Well, I don't know if this is rude to say or overstepping my bounds or whatever, but I'm glad she got to find her soulmate. And they got to be together. And they brought you and Shiro together before, you know. Yeah, he says. And it's oddly wistful as it is sad. It's a strange thing on Keith. One Lance has never heard. Me too. He lifts his head then, props himself up on an elbow, and turns to face him more fully. Lance just lays there as Keith hovers over him. As that dark hair falls around his face, slipping out of a messy bun that's barely holding on. Without really thinking about it, Lance reaches up, running his fingers through his hair and pulling the hair tie out. He lets his hand rest at the back of Keith's neck, fingers tangled in his hair, thumb brushing his jaw. Keith watches him, dark isolated, shadow but not from sorrow. This close, in the light of Keith's room, Lance can see that he does have freckles, small and light, barely noticeable. He has the strange urge to trace them, make constellations out of them, see what kind of star patterns make up Keith. Then Keith is leaning down, lips going slack, eyes falling close. Lance feels his own legs closing, head tilting, lips parting, ready to catch him at just the right angle. The loud vibration of Keith's phone on the nightstand makes them both jerk apart, eyes wide with a panic that they shouldn't have to feel but do anyway. Brows pinch, lips pursing into a small pout. Keith rolls away from him, grabbing the phone and sliding it to answer. What? He says, disgruntled, and clipped as he puts the phone to his ear. Lance just lays there watching him, heart hammering, disappointment twisting in his gut even as butterflies twist their way around his chest. Yeah, we're still here. Sounds good. Bye. He ends the call with a sigh, tossing his phone aside. Picture's almost here. Lance props himself on an elbow, smirk growing on his lips. At least they were cautious enough to call ahead of time. Keith snorts, sitting up and stretching his arms high over his head. Lance is not ashamed to admit that his eyes wandered to the exposed hip bones and slip of skin above his waistline. They just wanted to make sure we were still here before walking all the way out here. Lance looks back up, raising an eyebrow. It's a 10-minute walk. Keith lets his arms fall, shooting Lance a small spark. This is pitch we're talking about. True. Then Keith is taking up his position at the headboard again, picking up his notebook and prodding Lance with his toes once more. Now get back to work. Lance flops back down and groans. Alright, there's so many things to say. I have so many things to say about this portion. I understand that the painting that they created on the wall, it was his mom. And his mom and his dad, they both died by the time the car accident, just the same as Shiro. And yeah, really sorry about his loss. So yeah, I understand now where all of this painting that had been created, and she probably thought Keith about the paintings, and he wants to, put into this motion where he wants to become an artist. Any kind of artist he wants to do, just painting on the walls and draws on canvas, and he wants to taking courses like art classes and whatnot because he has a major of becoming an artist. So that's where it lies down. That's the kind of a background story. And Lance understood that his mom was an artist before Keith, and she taught Keith about painting and whatnot. Really, really deserved that this story has a lot of an emotion, and even after their parents died, Keith stayed at his grandparents' house, but not when Shiro comes by, and they're stepbrothers. Keith and Shiro were the stepbrothers, and then treated them like it's usual. And Shiro is part of their family. Well, in the story though. But yeah, I really, really like that when that happens. When Lance and Keith and they're going for a walk with Pitch. So let's just continue. The evening air is sharp and fresh, filling his lungs and brushing a chill across his cheeks, not enough to sink in, but enough to brush the surface, to put an edge to every breath he takes. It's a whisper of promise, a subtle declaration that fall is here. It's here and winter is just around the corner, hiding and waiting in the bite of the wind. Keith's eyes are closed as he leans back against the brick wall, arms crossed loosely over his chest. His leather jacket hangs open, allowing the breeze to slip past his outer layer and settle against his chest, seeping through the cotton of his t-shirt. He can feel it wisp against his exposed throat, tangle in his hair, brushing up his cheeks to cradle them with invisible, chill fingers. It feels good. It feels nice. The heat of summer has been slipping away for weeks now, but now it's finally gone for good, chased away by colder nights, crisper air, the crunch of leaves beneath his boots, the wave of jackets and hoodies on his shoulders, the smell of coffee and the comforting warmth of it in his hand. The sound of the occasional car down the main road of the campus is distant enough to blend into the background, fading into white noise. Familiar, distant noise. There's a few voices as people pass, conversations muted and meaningless. A general hum of electricity sounds the engineering building, as well as the vague and muted sounds of machinery. It's calming, soothing, peaceful. Oh my God, it's so cold. Well, almost peaceful. Keith cracks his eyes open, keeping his head tilted back against the brick behind him. Lance stands in front of him, jacket zipped up to his throat, chin and mouth buried in a scarf wrapped tightly around his neck. His hands are shoved deep in his pockets, shoulders hiked up to his ears as he stands stiff, bouncing on the balls of his feet. Cute, are you really that cold? Keith asked, voice a lazy drawl. You can feel a smirk tugging up at the edges of his lips. Lance turned to look at him then, eyes narrowed and nose poking out from atop his scarf. How are you not cold? He asked, voice muffled. Keith just shrugs, leather scraping against the rough brick. Didn't you live in the desert for a while? Keith shrugs again. Deserts are cold at night. Lance scoops, shuffling his feet and shifting from side to side. His nose ends up buried a little deeper in his scarf. Keith feels his smirk when just a fraction. Lance sees it, eyes narrowing in response. Yeah, well, Cuba is not. You didn't grow up in Cuba. I'm still Cuban. I don't have cold resistance in my blood. I don't think that's how it works. Shut up, fine arts major. Leave this to the scientists. Keith lets out a short huff of a laugh, a small snort, but doesn't argue further. Instead, he watches silently as Lance bounces around, humming nonsensical sounds under his breath, sounding increasingly more annoyed. He checks his phone several times, quick and short, before shoving his hands back in his pocket. "Come on, honk," he mumbles, voice muffled by his scarf. He dances from foot to foot, side to side, taking up all of the space on the sidewalk in front of him. While Keith is still and serene, Lance is a swirling tide, unable to stop, constant motion. He kicks a few rocks, twists and moves as his eyes dart around, looking for anything to distract him. The building, the sidewalk, the nearby statue pieces, the nearby road, people passing by. All the while he hums, clicks his tongue, makes sounds that don't seem to have any particular rhythm. "Are the sound effects necessary?" Keith asks, trying to keep his voice flat and dry as he cocks an eyebrow. Truth be told, it doesn't bother him, not in the slightest. It's just so wholly Lance. But that doesn't mean he won't tease him for it. Lance looks at him then, pout clear on his face, despite the fact that his mouth is hidden. But as his eyes roam over Keith's face, he seems to loosen up, seems to read the light in Keith's eyes, sees the shadow of a smirk at the edges of his lips. Honestly, the way Lance manages to read him is dangerous, just as it is thrilling. "You want sound effects?" Lance says, straightening a little, chin lifting from his scarf to reveal a slight grin that reaches the corners of his eyes. "What about boots and cats, boots and cats, boots and cats, boots and cats?" The bouncing gets more rhythmic, more vibrant, just more. Keith can't help it. He laughs, a laugh that bubbles up out of him unbidden, sounding choked and jarring. "Oh my god, stop! What you got against my big boxing, Keith, huh?" Lance says, grin widening as he shuffles closer to him, leans forward to Keith's face. "Boots and cats, boots and cats, boots and..." Keith shoves at his shoulder, laughter in his voice. "Lance, stop! That's so bad!" He moves back with Keith's shove, only to swing back forward. He leans forward, peering up at Keith through lidded eyes, smirk tugging playfully at his lips, a dangerous glint in his eyes. "If you want me to stop, maybe you should make me." His voice is low, husky, smooth and dark, suggested in all the right places, seeping into the charade of playfulness. It sends a shiver rushing down Keith's spine, sends heat coiling low in his gut, makes his chest feel tight as his heart lodges itself in his throat. His skin feels alive, buzzing with energy and anticipation. Lance is dangerous. Somehow, he manages to swallow his heart down. Somehow, he remembers how to breathe. His skin still feels like a live wire, flaring up where he can feel Lance's breath warm against the chill on his cheeks. Yet, when he speaks, he's pleased that his voice remains level. "I get the feeling you want to kiss me." It's a low whisper, light, fleeting, teasing. He's not always one to pat himself on the back, but yep, he's definitely thought his voice would crack, so he's proud of himself. It's not always easy to keep his composure around Lance these days. Now the thrill runs through him at the way Lance's eyes went for just a moment before going lidded, darkening as his lips tug up a little further. "And if I do? Please, if you want to kiss me with Klein, just do it." He aims for snarky. He thinks he hits a little too close to Restless. He wants it. He's surprised by how much he wants it. It's been a while since they kissed, since they agreed it would be okay to kiss more. They've come close, way too close, not close enough. He tries to hold Lance's gaze. He really does. Tries to hold on to that darkened lit gaze, staring at him with a spark, a hunger, a challenge, but his eyes flicker down, settle on those soft lips. Lips he knows are soft as hell and feel so good against his own. When his eyes flicker back upward, Lance's grin is knowing, pretty, goddamn infuriating. Then he's leaning in, the space between them slowly losing ground. He can feel his heart brushing his ribs, his blood pumping loud in his ears, his breath coming short. Everything that was pleasantly chilled only moments ago is now unpleasantly warm and hot, and he can feel Lance's breath against his lips and, "Hey guys, sorry you had to wait. Oh my god, you're not fighting again, are you?" Voice Honk's voice sends them both reeling. He jerks back, cracking his head against the wall, while Lance stumbles backward, nearly tripping over his own feet. Keith winces, rubbing the back of his head while Lance scrambles to compose himself. He ends up settling on something that looks like a guilty pout with an edge of offended indignation. It's subtle, but if Keith looks closely, he can see the flush creeping up his neck, settling on his cheeks. If he didn't know any better, he would think it was just because of the cold. "Why do you think we're fighting?" he asked, voice too loud, too defensive. Hunk takes it as he sighs, shoulders slumping as he hikes his bag high up on his back, fixing Lance with a tired look. "You guys always get all up in each other's faces when you're fighting, like the literal definition of butting heads." Lance straightens, true offense creeping into his tone. "We do not." Hunk gives him an amused stare. "You do. Pitch has bail proof." He sighs, shaking his head. By the end of it, his easygoing smile is back. "Anyway, sorry for the wait. You guys ready to go?" "We've been ready," Lance says, already hiding his chin back in his scarf. "I'm freezing." Hunk rolls his eyes. "It's not that cold." He shares a look with Keith, one that amused at Lance's expense. Keith returns it with a small smile, hoping the warmth on his cheeks would also be attributed to the chill. He is grateful for the wall behind him, because his knees are shaking. Hunk leads the way through campus, Lance at his side as they talk about Hunk's newest project. Keith lags behind. There's not much room on the walkway, but he doesn't mind. He trudges along behind them, hands in his pockets, simply enjoying the night and the idle conversation of his friends, all the while trying to compose his damn self. Jesus, he knew this was getting bad, but he didn't think it was this bad. Soulmate or not, Lance is dangerous. The flush finally leaks out of his face, leaving his cheeks pleasantly chilled once more by the night air. His legs no longer feel like jelly, and his heart rate is settled into something far more normal. Then Hunk's phone is ringing, and he puts it into his ear to answer. He turns a corner, and Lance lags behind. He doesn't realize what's happening until Lance is suddenly there, hands on his hips, pushing him back into the shadows and out of sight, lips on his, soft and warm and wet and moving slowly, sensually, stealing his breath away. Warm hands on his hips, grip gentle but firm, thumbs pushing past the hem of his shirt to brush against his hip bones. Keith is stiff for a second, just a second. Then he melts into him, hands finding and resting on Lance's arms, body pushing into him, lips working against his, head tilting to better slot them together. Then cold air as Lance leans back, eyes dark, smirk dangerous, cheek flushed, and breath as ragged as Keith's. "Guys?" Hunk's voice comes from around the corner. "Coming!" Lance calls, pulling away from him. He walks backwards several paces, shoving his hands back in his pockets, shooting Keith a wink before spinning on his heel to hurry around the corner after Hunk. Heart in his throat, heat going low in his gut, electricity raging through his veins. Lance McLean is dangerous. Okay, while they were walking, Lance had that emotional feeling and they're just in it for another kiss. And they're just walking outside of whoever's apartment. It could be Keith's apartment. And Lance had that cold feeling because he's really sensitive to, oh, this is cold. It's really cold. Why is it so cold? Yeah, that's my mom is saying. She kept saying it. "Oh, Michael, this is cold." Yeah, I don't believe it. It's not that cold. It's not that cold. Really. It's not. While walking, it's not that cold, but I just don't mind about the cold. I don't mind. And when Hung comes, he's shocked. He he's shocked about this, about the two. That's that's just that's just all getting to there, and yeah. Shiro's apartment is arguably nicer than Keith's, but there are bits and pieces around that reveal him as the tired grad student that he is. Nice countertops are scuffed, dented, and covered in loose papers. Dishes sit unwashed in the sink. A nice dining room table is cluttered with books and journals and papers, as well as a strange cacophony of objects. An open Oreo pack, a charger for 3DS, the instruction manual for Blender, and a beer bottles, a D&D handbook. The couch, while nice and leather, has mismatched pillows and an unfolded blanket tossed over the back of it. The coffee table is littered with empty cups on top of nicely made coasters. The TV is large, fancy, and covered across the top in a fine layer of dust. There are several paintings hung around the apartment, some done by Keith, some done by his mom. Alongside his paintings are old posters, courtesy of his time grooming with Matt in undergrad. Overall, it looks like he made an effort to make his space look like that of an adult, but get halfway through. But Keith likes it. It's far more homey and familiar than it would be if he had stainless steel appliances and modern art. If the furniture was stiff, new leather, and all the tables were elegantly carved oak instead of cheap things found in a thrift shop and touched up. While there are touched up, mature elements to the apartment, it's mostly a smattering of Shiro, bits and pieces of his life scattered around, molding together perfectly. It shares space, and it's always felt like a safe place for Keith. But despite that, he made the firm decision to have his own place when he came out here for college. Should offer his spare room, but Keith didn't want it. He wanted his own space, not to intrude on Shiro's. Besides, he needs Shiro's space to be a place of sanctity when his life becomes overwhelming. The door is locked when he arrives, but he has his own key. Shiro was very firm on that point, just as Shiro has a key to Keith's place. "I'm here," he calls out after letting himself in, pausing for only a moment to kick off his shoes, slamming the door shut behind him. He trudged out from the short entry hall, past the kitchen, and to the living room, where he promptly drops his bag to the floor and throws himself down over the couch. The old, worn leather groans under his weight, and he sinks into it, limbs going lax and head falling back. "You're here early," Shiro says, coming around the corner from his room. He's dressed in old sweatpants he has with a hole in the knee and a loose tank top. He holds a towel to his head, rubbing it idly against his hair while he stares down at the phone in his other hand. Keith shrugs, hating the way the leather of his jacket rubbed against the leather of the couch. He sits up to shrug it off, throwing it over his back. Class let out early. Shiro's already turning, heading toward the kitchen on bare feet. "Help with dinner?" Keith grunts a wordless affirmative and slides off the couch, stretching his arms high above his head before calling after Shiro. While reconnecting with Pitch has been great, and meeting new friends has been nice, and getting to know Lance has been both thrilling and terrifying, it's nice being able to spend time with Shiro alone, just the two of them, the way it used to be. It gives him a chance to simply breathe that he hadn't realized he's been needing. Amongst the chaos of starting at a new school, settling into his new apartment, meeting friends, starting Quidditch, and dealing with his soulmate problems, he starts to feel like he's drowning. Shiro is like a breath of fresh air, but it's mostly quiet as they easily fall back into the groove of cooking together. There's a rhythm and pattern to which they move around the kitchen, be it their kitchen back in their old house or the kitchen at his grandparents' or Shiro's kitchen here. They always had a way of moving around each other, both of them just instinctively aware of each other, being able to move wordlessly and gracefully around each other. Two gears moving in perfect sync as they gather ingredients, pots and pans, knives, cutting boards. It's familiar, and Keith finds comfort and peace in that familiarity. They decide to make curd before Keith even arrived. Not that it was much of a choice. It's been a while since they got together like this. had a proper night together, and they always end up making curry when that happens. It's a comfort dish, one of the first they learned to make, their parents' favorite, and a tradition they cling to even now. While they go through the motions, they talk about classes, projects, and work. They talk about Keith's stories from the gym and Shiro's stories about his professors. They talk about Quidditch, upcoming matches, things they want to improve on. They talk about how Shiro found a giant spider in his bathtub and nearly fell out of the shower in his panic. They talk about how Keith wasn't paying attention on his way to class and nearly tripped over someone before losing his balance and falling down a short hill. Nothing heavy, no forbidden subjects, nothing that would bring tension and lose the easy aura between them. Keith doesn't ask about Allura, and Shiro doesn't ask about Lance. No soulmate talk. That's the golden rule. Always has been. That is, until Keith finds himself face to face with a picture on the fridge, and for the first time, he is unable to look away. It's a simple picture. An old one. Keith's mom, Shiro's dad, Keith, Shiro. He's young, hair just freshly cut far too short. Shiro's in his graduation robes, right after his high school graduation. They're all smiling, all of them, squinting against the glare of the sun. A family. Perfect. Whole. Happy. The question comes to his lips unbidden, slips past his defenseless quickly, quietly, escaping before he can hold it back. Do you think they were happy? He barely hears his own voice. There's a lot in there that he hates hearing. It makes his own voice sound foreign. Shiro doesn't answer right away, and Keith doesn't look away from the picture. He hears a pause, hears a shuffling, hears the question what died in Shiro's throat as he must turn around to see what Keith means. Sees his eyes glued to the fridge. Soft, padding footsteps, a heavy hand on his shoulder. Warm, familiar, comforting, a slight squeeze. You know they were, he says, voice soft and kind. What about your parents? He doesn't know where the question comes from. He just knows it's been bouncing around in his head for a while, and he always buries it before he can dwell on it too much. He thinks Lance might have been the catalyst for it, but he can't say for sure. And now it's out in the open before he can pull it back. He shouldn't push. He should let the subject drop. They never talk about this. It's a silently forbidden topic, but Keith's own rules. He knows that. He knows. Just drop the subject. Let it go. Said, he pushes. Dad and your mom, he pauses, short and brief as understanding sinks in for sure. They were soulmates? He says it like a question, but it's not. They both know it. He knows that Shiro's parents were soulmates, just as his own were. It's never been a question, but here he is, framing it like one. Yeah, Shiro's voice trails off, still soft but gaining fonder notes. Nostalgia. A sorrow that's long since healed, and all that remains are the good things. Fond memories. A vain wish to go back, but knowing you can't. He sounds distant. Yeah, they were. He should drop this subject. He should. His gut is twisting itself into knots. He feels nauseous, like his stomach has dropped. His chest feels strained, but he breathes through it. Breathes heavily through his nose, in controlled breaths, and keeps going. He doesn't know why. Were they happy? Pause. Why this sudden interest? He can practically hear the curiosity in his voice. Shiro denies it, but he has an eyebrow-raised voice. Keith knows it. Hitch knows it. Matt knows it. They like to tease him about it. Keith knows without having to look at him, and definitely doesn't want to meet his eyes right now. Not when he's feeling something. Some mess of a knot of emotion that he doesn't even know how to process himself. He doesn't know how to answer the question, not when he doesn't even understand his own thought process. Not when all of this comes bouncing around, and he's suddenly thinking more about soulmates than he ever has before. And he's pretty sure it has to do with how soft Lance's lips are, and the little sounds he makes when they kiss. So instead of answering, he just shrugs, feeling the rise and fall of the weight of Shiro's hand as it rests there. I don't know for sure, Shiro admits, voice soft and quiet of the kitchen, but remain casual. An odd bit of indifference that comes with time and age. There are some things parents won't tell their kids, but yeah, I think they were happy. Not so much at the end, but that had more to do with, you know, he knows, the cancer, the declined health, the slow ebbing of her life until she was just a shell of the person she had once been, until she was gone. There's a silence, one that he doesn't know how to fill. He can hear the curse simmering, the vague hum of the air circulating through the vents. His heartbeat sounds too loud. Dad wasn't happy for a long time, Shiro says. And there's more a raw pain there, one that's not as distant or accepted. Soft, sad. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. I tried to cheer him up, but I think it was lonely. And it was a loneliness that I couldn't feel. Then he met your mom, and he started smiling again, an edge of fond happiness utterly. I'll always be grateful to her for that. He hadn't meant to bring this into their cozy little family night, but here it was, a big ugly elephant in the room, permeating their safe space with memories that he would prefer to keep buried. He feels bad for dragging Shiro down into this, but Shiro has never been as close off as he has. Shiro has always wanted to talk about things like this. Keith has just never given him a chance. He should have known better than to bring it up, knowing that Shiro would drop it once it was dragged into the open. Or maybe that's exactly why he brought it up to begin with. To have a talk he always wanted to have, deep down, but was too scared to. All he knows is that he's already having regrets, but he does nothing to stop the flow of conversation. I know what happened with your parents, Keith. It said gently with a light squeeze at his shoulder. It's reassuring, soothing, despite the fact that the words open up something raw and hollow inside him. They weren't happy, he manages to say, voice sounding choked, hoarse. His mouth feels dry, and his tongue feels thick. I know. Soulmates doesn't mean you end up happy. The words feel like they're choking him, but he gets them out, voice only cracking once. But that's the great thing about them, don't you think? Key looks at them then, turning and leaning away slightly, gazing up at him through narrowed eyes and beneath a furrowed brow. He can feel his lip curling slightly, nose crinkling. Shiro takes one look at him and laughs. The sound is oddly disjointed with their conversation, but pleasant nonetheless. I know it sounds crazy. He interrupts him with just a short snort, but Shiro just squeezes his shoulder and continues, eyes drifting back to the photo of their family. But I'm comforted by it. Just hear me out. He holds a finger, cutting off Keith's protest. He closes his mouth, huffing as he crosses his arms over his chest, shoulders hunching. The universe has given me a gift, a link and promise of my perfect match, someone who has the potential to just complete me. But it's not guaranteed. Nothing in life is set in stone, and soulmates are no exception. How the relationship turns out is entirely up to me. I still have a choice. My decisions matter. I have the power to build my own happiness. You also have the power to it up, Key grumbles. Shiro chuckles, patting Key's shoulder before reaching around him to the other side, pulling him to his side in a half hug. Yeah, that too. He doesn't sound put off by that fact. Keith leans into him, breathing in the familiar smell of his soap and shampoo, the vague scent of laundry detergent that clings to his shirt. The combination is spicy and soft, wrapping Keith up in a cocoon of familiarity. Aren't you afraid of messing everything up? He mumbles, eyes roaming over the feature of the Shiro on the picture in front of them. Without the scar or stalk of white hair, it looks so young. Shiro hums, and Keith can hear the thoughtful rumble deep in his chest. Yeah, sometimes. But I prefer to believe in my ability to fix it if I do. His arms tightens around Keith, and without really thinking about it, Keith turns into him, wraps his arms around Shiro's waist, fingers digging into the back of his shirt. He buries his face in Shiro's chest, feeling the press of his cheek atop his head, relaxing as his arms settle around him. It can be scary that our choices have consequences, but I prefer to find comfort in the fact that we do have choices. The universe has given you a gift, and it's up to you what you do with it. but it's a shame to let it go to waste without trying, don't you think? Keith sighs, feeling his body slump. He squeezes his eyes shut, ignoring the burn he feels there and focusing on taking deep breaths of Shiro's scent, letting it settle him. Besides, Lance isn't so bad, is he? It's lighter, teasing, a unspoken chuckle rumbling in his chest. No, he mumbles, begrudging and reluctant. But he's a lot like Mom. It's a thought that has been nagging at him for weeks, nibbling at the edge of his mind where he refused to acknowledge it. He does now. Lets it out into the open. A simple fact, a simple comparison, but one that fueled the fire of his fear, one that he didn't like to admit. Brash, eager, headstrong, hopeful, convinced of a fantasy, rushing headlong into the future, running straight for the happily ever after without bothering to live the story. A dreamer until she was forced to wake up. Lance is a lot like his mom was, and it terrifies him. The other thing has you to level him out then, huh? She pulls away, forcing Keith out of the safety of his chest. He looked up at him, meeting his gaze with pursed lips and the pinch between his brows. She just smiles, small and gentle. You have choices, Keith. You can choose to make it work with Lance. The weight on his shoulders doesn't lift, but it feels a hell of a lot more manageable. Thanks, Shiro, he says, and he means it. Offers a small smile that Shiro returns. Out of the sanctity of Shiro's chest, nose clear of his body wash and deodorant. Keith's nose curls. He sniffs. Once, twice. Is is the rice burning? Shiro falls instantly, practically shoving Keith aside to get into the stove. They try to salvage the rice, but it's a lost cause. They both decide to give up on it completely in order to take out simply to get the rice to eat with their curry. They end up spending the evening sinking into the warm leather of Shiv's couch, eating their body weight in curry and popcorn, idly scrapping the bottom of Netflix for terrible movie selections. He doesn't think about Soulmate for the rest of the evening, feeling lighter than he has in months, perhaps even years. Definitely. I know that Shiro and Keith, they were brothers at that time, so you get the kind of a background story, and they talk about their lives, Shiro's experiences of college, and soulmates. It's very important to have soulmates because it comes to good and bad terms. In good terms, you could be with somebody, you could be there, but the bad terms, you might end up dying, and just let somebody to have another soulmate. But that's the point where Shiro talks about soulmates because they do have choices when it comes to having a soulmate. It's up to you to make it this person, your soulmate, feel better. And the universe wants you to have this, and it's your job is to be happy with this person and to not mess it up. And as Keith remembers that picture, they were happy at that times, but in reality, they're not. They have lives to get. They have life. They have their lives to get through, but sometimes they end up in a worse times, in worse place. I mean, you can understand what I'm saying, right? Yeah. All right. Let's continue. The smell of ink is sharp, poignant, and fills his senses with a sense of acidic familiarity. They make scented markers these days, but Keith has never liked them. They're too falsely floral or fruity, fake delights that smell like chemicals or barely conceal the true smell of ink beneath them. He prefers the raw scent of paint and ink, makes it feel more real. Doesn't try to dress up what it is. Reminds him of the days and nights spent in his mom's studio. Reminds him of playing in paint when she wasn't looking. Reminds him of helping her on projects. Reminds him of the two of them sitting in the middle of the tarp on the floor as she shows him the strategies of utilizing himself as a canvas. Reminds him of the days when it was just the two of them, alone but strong together, both finding purpose and solace among paint splatters and messy brush strokes. Reminds him of the days when they were made whole, both of them coming out of the studio with paint dried beneath their nails and hair falling out of messy buns, spatters of their clothes as they laughed, coming to a warm kitchen to Shiro and his dad, smiling fondly and telling them to wash up. It reminds them of the days following the accident, days of grief hanging heavy on the shoulders, days of the feeling gutted and hollowed out, days where nothing seemed to matter and everything was numbed, days where he painted through those emotions just to feel again, to remember, to hold onto a piece of the family he lost. It reminds him of days spent with his grandma setting up a new studio in their home. Her hands gnarled and movements slow, but her passion for colors and paints shining through, giving him a glimpse of where his mom had gotten it from. Reminds him of painting with his grandma to mourn the loss of a mother and a daughter. The accident. He hasn't been able to sleep. Too many thoughts bouncing around his head, colliding, forming new thoughts, new tangents, never full forming, but never really going away. Creating chaos, creating a web that held him trapped, refusing to let him fall into unconsciousness. So he had done what he always does when his thoughts won't let him sleep. He had gotten out of bed to paint, to channel loose thoughts out of himself, so the emotions could settle and he could finally rest. He sits on the edge of the couch, legs propped up on his coffee table, wearing nothing but his boxer brief and a t-shirt. The surface was littered with open paint jars, colors of blacks, whites, grays, and reds. A palette sits nearby, splattered with his various mixes. A thick brush is held loosely between his teeth, all but forgotten as he uses a smaller brush to paint details. His entire leg is covered, and he ignores the mess his leg hair has become, focusing instead on the colors on the sign. The accident. One adult female dead upon impact. One adult male died before the ambulance could get there. A young man injured, heavy bleeding, facial injury, arm pinched in the wreckage of a car, emergency amputation. Keith hadn't been in the car, but he could have been. When he had been in a dark place, when the grief had been thick and the wound had been fresh, Keith had wished he had been in the car. At least then he could have suffered with his family, instead of miraculously being unharmed and whole. He felt guilty. Guilty for not somehow changing it, for not being with them in their final moments. Guilty simply because he was alive. He's moved past that, but it doesn't stop the what-ifs from creeping up at him in the late hours when his barriers are down and shadows creep in from the shadows. What if he had been in the car? He would have rather been in the car than Shiro. Even to this day, he wishes he could have switched places with Shiro. He's seen everything his brother has gone through since the accident, and he wishes he could take that away, bear it so Shiro wouldn't have to. He's the kind one, the understanding one, the gentle one. He didn't deserve what had happened, but at least he had Allura. And Keith wonders how Lance would have handled the same situation in Allura's place. Would he have noticed? Would Keith have reached out to him, told him, or would he have pulled away all the same? If he had been in that car instead of Shiro, how many things would be different? Would he still have pulled away from his soulmate, or would he have reached out, connected? And if he had, would that have changed how he felt about the whole thing? Would his reaction to Lance have been different? Too many what-ifs, too many questions. They bounce around, colliding, multiplying, choking him. In another world, another life, another universe. What would have happened if he had been in the car? He always sat on the opposite side of the car for Shiro. Would his injuries have been indifferent? What if he lost a limb? A different limb? He had known what he had wanted to paint before he had even sat down. He's rushing through it, but he needs to get it out. Paint strokes rapid and messy, uncoordinated, slathering paint on the skin. He gets the base down quickly, distantly pleased how the chaotic strokes can be seen. Then he starts on the details, blacks, reds, whites, fitting into the groups of his knee, near his ankle, and where the base cuts off mid-thigh. He paints himself a metal leg, reminiscent of Shiro's prosthetic arm. If he had reached out to Lance then, would things have been different? Would they have a romance more like Shiro and Laura? Does he even want that? He doesn't know. He doesn't know. He doesn't know. I would be honest to you that this story has some sad sides into it. Because Keith had imagined to where the accents have been coming through and just been in the days of where they remembered some good memories or some bad memories or the accident, the car accident when Shiro barely survived and he lost his protect arm, but his mother and his father were died and they weren't survived. I mean, this is a really getting yourself in mixed up emotion. The darkness just weighing you down like gravity, and that's what Keith happened. That's what happens to Keith. And if that would have been changed, he would have been the opposite side of the car where Shiro is not driving or Keith is on the wheels. It would change the time, their lives. It would definitely change I mean, their lifetime. But we don't want to know. Can't alter the past, and it just stays where it is. There's too many what ifs questions because you can't alter the past because you asking too many what ifs, and that's what Keith had been asking. Too many what ifs questions, and doesn't even talk about soulmates at all. Just focusing on painting all day, all night. Wherever he goes, he paints. I just feel like the story is going both ways, or one side or the other. But I like it. He's not a huge fan of working the weight room desk. It's a smaller desk than the front, and he actually has to pay attention to what people are doing instead of just mindlessly answering simple questions and passing out occasional equipment. The chair here is also significantly less comfortable, his knees hitting the bottom of the desk and leaving very little leg room. Not to mention the computer here is slow as hell. The work itself is pretty easy. He just has to sit here for the most part and make sure none of the dude bros hurt themselves. Make sure they're not throwing weights around, dropping them, or misusing the equipment. Barely thinks as he spouts off reprimands. No running in the weight room. Don't drop the weights. If you're not going to do anything, please move so others can use the equipment. Under most circumstances, he hates being cooped up here. At the front desk, he occasionally gets to walk around the gym, making sure everything is in order. Here, the most movement he gets is occasionally getting up to clear the mirror or the seats or organize the weights because people can put them back in number order. Today, however, he appreciates the fact that he's not expected to move much. He also appreciates the fact that he's alone at his desk and isn't expected to make idle conversation with a coworker. He likes Ginny, he really does. He's just tired. So damn tired. Getting up to paint his leg had seemed like a good idea until it was 4 in the morning. He still needed to take a shower to wash it off, and he had to get up early for classes. He can practically feel the bags under his eyes. When someone comes up to ask him to show them how to explain how to use one of the machines, it takes him a solid 3 seconds to react, looking up from his phone and looking slowly as he tries to focus on the guy in front of the desk. Tall, short-cut hair, strong jaw, conventionally attractive, typical dude bros he sees up here. Keith grunts his response and slips out from behind his circle platform of the desk. He charges over to the machine in question and goes through the basics, voice flat, monotone, and gestures vague. He's been through this a million times, has used this machine a million times. Well, maybe not this one, but ones like it. He really needs to get back into a gym routine, especially now that he has a free access to the gyms on campus. The guy thanks him, says something nondescript and vague and cliche. He misses the words, but it's the tone that catches Keith's attention. It's just a fraction beyond casual, but it rubs him the wrong way. He looks up, catches the guy's eyes, sees the glint there. It's an expression that Keith is very familiar with. Lance looks at him like that all the time. It looks infinitely better on Lance. In fact, no one should look at him like that besides Lance. Ever. Face blank and expression flat. He gives the guy a very obvious once over. One eyebrow raised, eyes as dead as he feels. Barely visible sole marks are faded on the guy's arm. He doesn't look like he's trying to hide them, so he must be in a position where casual flings don't really matter much to him. It's pretty common, but Keith isn't interested. Not at all. He scoops, rolling his eyes as he turns away. It's rude, he knows it is, but he also doesn't care. He's not paid to be polite, and he's way too tired for this. Besides, that guy has nothing on Lance. Lance, with his beautiful brown skin, his long limbs, long fingers, lean torso, broad shoulders, narrow hips, tight ass. Because, yes, Keith has look. How could he not? He hasn't gotten brave enough to cop a feel yet, but if he doesn't want to. But Lance, with his beautiful blue eyes, and his slightly upturned nose, and soft thin lips, and his voice. Damn, Kogani, you look like. He blinks, familiar voice sinking in, making something in his chest react before his mind fully catches up. He lifts his head from where he had been resting in his palm, spinning his chair a little until he face to face with none other than Lance. He stands on the other side of the desk, elbow and forearm resting on the chest, high countertop, eyeing Keith with one eyebrow raised and amusement tugging at the lines of his face. Lance? Great. Intelligible. His smile widens enough to show teeth. The one and only. Keith brows pinch, lips pursed in just affection. What are you doing here? Lance rolls his eyes, half shrugging a shoulder. His smirk remains in place. I'm here to work out, obviously. Keith cocks an eyebrow, gaze straying from Lance to pointedly sweep across the weight room before returning. Here? Ouch, dude. That hurts, he says in mock offense, but he can't quite turn off his smirk. Yeah, here. How can I decide we need to work out more? He lifts his free hand, putting out one finger. Mondays are cardio, another finger. Wednesdays are weight training, third finger. And Fridays I teach Hunk how to swim. Do you even know how to weight train? You hurt me, Keith. You really do. He doesn't sound offended. Your arms are noodles, Lance. Keith Evans. Excuse you? I have some muscle there. He emphasizes this by lifting his free arm, flexing. His muscle tank leaves his arms bare, and while it's not a huge difference, there's definitely some definition there. Not huge bulging muscles, but long lean ones. Keith stares a moment longer than necessary, but then he feels his lips tugging up into a small smile. Sure. Can't you humor me? Nope. You're mean when you're tired. Many would argue that it's my default state. I would probably be one of those people. He doesn't even know when he started smiling, but he knows it is. It's an effect that Lance has on him, and he doesn't know how he feels about it. Really, though? Do you know what you're doing here? He doesn't know where he's going with that. What he's going to do, spend his lip showing Lance how to work out? Maybe. He could? No. Nope. Lance shrugs. That's why I have Hunk to show me. He leads us through weight training, and I lead us through swimming. It's our system. Hunk? He glances around then, but he doesn't see any sign of him. Not in the weight room, or the open hallway, or the indoor track he can see through the class window's wall, or the stairs that lead down to the first floor. Lance waves him off. He's getting changed. He'll be up here soon. So, he draws off, face turned away, casual, but his eyes are on Keith, sidelong and almost shy. Want to show me around? Sure, he says, and he's moving out from behind his desk before he really realizes it. As he comes around the corner, he can take Lance in fully. A muscle tank, open at the side to reveal far more of his ribs and chest than necessary. Loose baggy gym shorts that caught right above his knee. And Kate's painting.
He had almost forgotten about it. Or rather, he had almost forgotten that he's seated again, tattooed on Lance's skin. It clearly looks like a robotic leg, details standing out against the gray of the base, but it doesn't look metal. You can clearly see the swipes and streaks of his brushstrokes, giving the whole thing a more artistic edge. He's kind of proud of it, actually. But then Lance is shifting his weight to his other foot, moving his painted leg slightly behind the other, toe touching the ground, rubbing against the back of his other heel. Keith looks up at him, eyebrow raised, confusion coiling uncertain in his chest because Lance looks embarrassed. He looks away, still half leaning on the desk, free hand rubbing the back of his neck, bottom lip caught between his teeth, brows pinched. Sorry, I, uh, what? Sorry, about, you know, he gestures vaguely downward, toward his painted leg. Keith's frown deepens, feels his brows furrow. His throat feels oddly tight, his stomach strangely suspended, waiting to drop at any moment. Adrenaline makes his limbs feel uncomfortably light, tingly, sickly. Does Lance not like it? He's never considered that. His soulmate has always been ecstatic to get paintings, has always praised him, has never given any indication that they dislike anything that Keith has ever done artistically. But maybe he had just been saying that. Keith isn't soulmate. Lance wouldn't have to lie to him. Are you sorry? Keith asked. He can't tell if his voice sounds as strange to Lance as it does to himself. I don't know. Lance still won't look at him. His eyes roam the desk, the room, the ceiling, the walls, the other students, the floor. They avoid Keith completely. Are you embarrassed about your soul mark? Lance's eyes snapped to him, then, eyes wide and far, far too guilty. What? No. You always show off your soul marks. The paintings. It's what you do. It comes out as an accusation, with an edge of harshness that Keith hadn't intended. Lance flinches, and Keith has the decency to feel bad about it. But that doesn't change the fact that Lance is acting strange, and Keith needs to know if he's done something wrong. I know, he says, arm dropping from the desk as he shifts his weight, free hand rubbing his upper arm. He stares down at his toes, scuffing them against the floor. But it's weird now, isn't it? He looks up at Keith through his lashes, bashful, shy, pleading. Keith is too tired for this. He sighs, crossing his arms over his chest, shifting his weight to one foot. Lance, what are you talking about? Well, with us being, well, us. He moves his hands, gesturing between them vaguely, tilting his head to the side. His lips are pursed into a small frown, brows furrowed. It's weird to talk about our soulmates when we're, you know, isn't it? Oh, oh, that's what's bothering him. Keith relaxes, feels his shoulders slump and a knot in his gut loosen. He feels like he can't breathe again, and he lets it out in a long exhale, a relieved sigh wrapped up with one of the exasperated fondness. Lance, it's only weird if you make it weird. He blinks, an edge of weariness creeping into his features. What do you mean? He asks, words slow and careful. Look, just because we're doing stuff. Oh god, why is it so hard to just say it out loud? Guess it's just going to dance around that bush forever. His fingers rub together where they rest against his bicep. That doesn't mean you can't talk about your soulmate. I know you have a soulmate. I know how you feel about them. I don't expect that to change. So, don't feel like you have to change. It's not weird. He perks up. At that, standing a little straighter, brows finally relaxing. Really? He asked, eyes far too bright. He nods. Really? But you don't like talking about soulmates. Yeah, well, you do. The rest goes unspoken, but he can tell Lance gets it from the way the remaining tension leaks out of him, from the way his eyes go all lidded and soft, and from that small smile that curls the edges of his lips. Thanks, Keith. His voice is way, way too soft, and Keith is far, far too tired for this. He clears his throat, feeling heat creeping up his neck as he turns away with a shrug. No problem. So, there's an edge to his voice, a playful one, a leading one. Since you don't have a problem with it, and and suddenly Lance is moving, stepping back and swinging his foot up to prop it up on the side of his desk, putting his lead painting on display. Just look at this, dude. It's awesome. He looks it over, allowing himself to really appreciate his work on Lance's skin for the first time. And for once, it doesn't cause a clench in his gut. Rather, he feels a strange, warm bubbling. Yeah, he says. I suppose it is. They're at the gym right now, and Keith is just sat there behind the desk, and then Lance comes up on the front desk, and yeah, he met it at the gym. And Lance always comes by with Honk for Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, for their routines, for their weights, and for their swimming lessons with Lance. All in all that said and done, he just notices about Lance's soul marks, all the soul marks that he did from the prosthetic arm that he drew, well, someone drew. We'll put that in secret. And yeah, he hadn't realized it when Lance notices about the soul marks. They just ignored it and never talked about the soulmates just for a bit. But we'll find out soon enough. As much as he loves spending time with friends and doing things and going out, Lance has always loved having quiet alone time. He's always enjoyed being able to be by himself, without the pressure of another's presence, without the expectancy of conversation, without the noise. Being free to just sit back, relax, and give himself a little TLC. TLC usually starts with spa night, and spa night always puts him in good place. So after he's taken a long, hot shower, which he washed himself thoroughly, and wrapped himself up in his favorite silky bathrobe, his favorite and more expensive face mask in place, and healing his skin, Lance is annoyed that he still feels overly restless. He just can't settle down, can't just let things go and be at peace with the universe or whatever. He misses Hunk, which is stupid. He just saw Hunk yesterday. He sees Hunk every day. They live together in the dorms. They see far more of each other than is probably healthy. He should be ecstatic for this opportunity to have a weekend alone and a room to himself. He should be laid back, watching a movie marathon while Illy scrolling the internet and eating the whole pizza for himself. What he shouldn't be doing is sitting tense and uncomfortable in one of their bean bags, foot bouncing restlessly, unable to find anything to occupy or distract him. Unfortunately, that's exactly what he's doing. It's just nothing is right. Nothing is interesting enough to catch his attention. He's restless, bored, agitated. By all rights, he should be sinking to his blankets and turn off his cell phone and losing himself to cheesy movies. Instead, he's buzzing with obnoxious energy and thoughts that go a mile a minute, gone before he has a chance to dwell on them. Ugh, he hates this. He hates this even more because if he's honest with himself, he knows exactly why he's feeling this way. And he hates that, too. Usually when he starts thinking too much, when he starts spiraling down the pit of soulmates, when he starts to doubt himself, doubt his soulmate, wish he were anyone else, wish he were like his parents, like his siblings, like his grandparents. Hunk is there. Hunk is there to pull him out of the shadows, stop his spiral, anchor him in the eye of the storm, and keep him from being swept away. Keeps him afloat until the storm passes and he's strong enough to sail on his own again. But now Hunk isn't here. Hunk is gone for the weekend visiting Shay, and that's part of the problem. Wait, no, 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 no. Hunk and his soulmate aren't the problem. He's happy for Hunk. He is. He really, really is. But God, he's a mess. He's jealous of Hunk, envious of what he has. Shouldn't be, and hates that he is. But it's a feeling that hasn't gone away, one he doubts will never go away. Not until finally meets his own soulmate. Hunk is living the dream. He had a loving relationship with his soulmate before their first meeting. They weren't super close, but they were cute and sweet, and God if he doesn't want that. Then they met in a super hilarious way, a way that makes a great story. And now they visit each other occasionally and talk on the phone and Skype. And Lance, he wants it. He wants that life. And he feels bad for wanting it. He should be grateful for what he has. But it's so hard when what he's always wanted is still so far from his grasp. So far away that it seems like an impossibility at this point. He's just watching his friends connect with their soulmates is bittersweet. He's happy for them. Loves watching love happen. Loves seeing the beauty of soulmates blossom right in front of his eyes. It makes him all soft and warm. Because yeah, he's a romantic at heart. But there's an edge to his happiness. A bitter edge in his heart. A sour taste left in his mouth. Because he wants it. And he can't have it. He doesn't blame his friends. He would never. It's not their fault. He wants them to be happy. He doesn't want them to have to censor themselves around him. He'll meet his own soulmate one day, and it'll be amazing. Until then, he just has to wait, like he always has. Patient, like he always has been. He loves his soulmate. He really does. Loves them more than anything. He just wishes they were here. He should write to them. No, no, he shouldn't. They've been responding to him more often, but he shouldn't push it. He doesn't want to scare them away. Now when things are finally starting to look up, even if it's just an ember in the darkness, it's better than nothing. With how he's feeling now, he doesn't quite trust himself to write to his soulmate without somehow it up. He should text Keith. No, nope, nah, bad idea. Bad idea. He should definitely not text Keith. Keith is not a replacement for his soulmate, and he's not a placeholder. He's just a friend, a really good friend, whom Lance is very attracted to and very much likes to kiss and touch, and wouldn't mind doing more, because he's human and he doesn't know how long it'll take to actually meet his soulmate, so he might as well have fun while he waits, right? Right, but that doesn't mean he should reach out to Keith when he's aching for soulmate. That wouldn't be okay, right? Right, but Keith is still his friend. And he reaches out to friends when he's upset and needs distractions. And Keith is a damn good distraction. No, bad Lance. But it would be effective. Why spend his time moping when he could spend his time living? Besides, Keith likes kissing him, too. He's seen the way Keith looks at him. He's not that obvious. Keith's just attracted to him as he is to Keith. Why is he overthinking this? They literally agreed to this whole thing because they didn't want to wait for their soulmates to live their damn lives. And right now, Lance is tired of sitting still. He wants to live. He doesn't want to wait forever. Yeah, mope later when Hawk is here to help him. Distract himself now with Keith and his stupid deadpan snark and pretty eyes and soft pouty lips. And he has no reason to feel bad about it because this is his life. His soulmate didn't want to connect. That's fine. They'll have plenty of time to do that after they met. He doesn't have to live on pause until then. For now, Lance is going to live his life and spend time with a pretty boy with long dark hair and eyes like the midnight sky and hands at the firm and focused and determined, but oh, so gentle when they touch him. All he has to do is get his phone and text. Oh, Keith texted them.
How are your art history exam go? Like on a scale from 1 to 10, or I suppose like on a scale from 1 to 100. I won't know that until next week. But hey, I didn't walk out of there looking as devastated as some of the others, so I suppose that's a good sign. Still hoping for a grading curve though. How'd you feel about it? I feel like I regret taking this class. That's not a new feeling. True. How about next time you just take the test for me? No. Such profanity! You kiss me with that mouth? I'd like to. Oh, ho ho. For tonight, aren't we? Shrug emoji. Did you just. Keith, did you just type out shrug emoji? Couldn't be asked to find the actual emoji. Unbelievable. Thanks. So, what are you doing tonight? Homework and laundry. On Saturday? Yeah. Oh, oh no, Keith, no. How about interested in doing literally any of that? You come over, we go get cheap food, and then go get some drink, and I kick your ass at pool. That's funny. Is that a no? It's definitely a yes. I just think it's funny that you think you can beat me at pool. Your tight ass is going down. Now, who's being forward? Not a proposal, just an observation. Mm-hmm. Just get over here. Okay.
Okay, so when it comes to this relationship between Lance and Keith, Lance has his thought, needs somebody to just to cope up with him. I mean, Keith is the only person to just get himself out of his mess and try to relax as possible and not messing up again. Because Lance and Keith, they are getting along for those two. The kissing part, yeah, we might include that. But really, Lance had a lot of his emotions mixed up, and he really wants to make a decision to if Keith should just go along with this and go with the flow or stand it up and just forget about the soulmate talk. Yeah, it could be a make or break for between the two, but they just have to get along somehow. I really do.
Bar Lance takes him to is one of his favorites. There are several in town. One is good for dancing, another is great for food, a third is good for trivia and sitting with friends. A couple others play live music most weekends. This one, however, is his favorite because it has a game room. Nothing fancy or extravagant. A section for dart boards, a few foosball tables, some pinball machines, and some pool tables in the center of the room. The patrons of this particular bar tend to be older as well. Less crazy, much more chill, makes for a relaxed night out as opposed to one with screaming drunks and dim bar lights. Being a Saturday night, the bar is getting crowded. Thankfully, they arrive before the party crowd, and this particular bar is usually the last to fill up anyway. Unfortunately, the pool tables are the first to be occupied, and they're in use when Keith and Lance get there. So they cheat drinks, bottom of the barrel, poor quality but affordable for college students. Keith gets a rum and coke, and Lance gets a vodka cranberry. The cranberry is just tart enough to cut the sharp edge of a cheap vodka. They pick seats at the bar that runs along the edge of the game room, sitting on stools with their back to the bar, eyeing the pool tables like a pair of vultures. They lean in close, knees knocking together but neither of them acknowledging it. Their heads tilt together, and Lance can occasionally feel Keith's hair brush across his forehead, his temple, his cheek, and neither of them look at each other. Like if they don't make eye contact, they don't have to acknowledge how close they are. Their gazes sweep the room, whispering under their breaths about the things they see. Look at that guy trying to impress that cluster of drunk chicks. He sucks at darts. What's the point of foosball? Those dudes are going hard. It's just boring. Check out those two dudes across the room. Want to take bets on how long it takes for them to talk to each other? Mostly they watch the games of pool going on at the tables, looking for any sign that the players might be done anytime soon. And as you can see, Ricky McSnapback is going the route of intimidation, Lance says. Lean over into Keith's space, knee pressing into his thigh. He holds a hand up over his mouth, speaking in a voice that's primed, polished, and dry enough to mimic the most basic of newscasters. Look at those biceps, Keith. Perfectly sculpted for this purpose alone. His look of unimpressed nonchalance completes the facade. Keith snorts, dissolving into soft chuckles that smell like rum and sound like heaven. Ricky, he asked, eyes crinkling at the corners. Lance shrugs. He looks like a Ricky. Just roll with it. Lance grins, poking Keith's shoulder to silently encourage him. Keith clears his throat, sitting up a little straighter, leaning back against the bar with one elbow propped up on the worn wood. He tilts his head, bringing his lips close to Lance's ear. It seems, however, that his efforts are in vain. Keith says, voice of mimicry of Lance's. He had encouraged Keith to join him, but he had been expecting the typical dry monotone. Instead, what he gets is so completely different from anything that he's expecting of Keith that he snorts loudly, jerking as laughter shakes out of him. He slaps his hand over his mouth, hunching forward to stifle his giggles. Keith smirks and leans forward with him, keeping close and continues, but this time he slips an accent into it, slipping into a southern withdrawal with all the right inflections to make a reporter proud. Samuel Pop-Collar McGee seems completely unaffected, and an attempt at intimidation falls flat. Unfortunately, Samuel isn't great at this game to begin with and fumbles his hit, sending the ball scattering but pockets none of them. Ooh, except the cue ball. Better luck next time, Samuel. Lance snorts again, giggles slipping from between his fingertips. He rests his forehead on Keith's shoulder, turning his laughter into his neck. He doesn't need to look to know that Keith is grinning. Then Keith is poking his side, making him jump away. Table's free, he says before Lance can protest, and the beginnings of a pout disappear immediately. His head whips up, locking onto a table that was just vacated. He grins, turning back to Keith. You clean the table while I get another round of drinks? Lance slips back into the router room while Keith moves toward the pool table. He wedges his way through people sitting at the bar and waits to catch the bartender's attention. He glances around as he waits, at the bartenders, at the patrons around him. He catches sight of a few soul marks, a few scribbles of faded and fresh ink alike on their arms, and, for once, he doesn't feel jealous, or an aching pang of longing, or anything like that. He's actually having fun, and Keith is a great distraction. He makes Lance feel alive, takes up all of Lance's attention so his thoughts don't have a chance to wander. Makes him feel good by doing nothing but sitting there and looking surly as Lance pokes fun at him. When he's with Keith, he's able to just be, to just exist in the moment without the lingering thought of his soulmate hanging over him. And it's mostly because he feels slightly guilty thinking about his soulmate when he's with Keith, but it's still a freeing feeling nonetheless. He still loves his soulmate, always will give anything to meet them right here and right now. But he knows that's not a possibility, and Keith lets him enjoy the present for once without aching for the future. It's freeing, exhilarating, it's addicting, it's a little terrifying. He orders the same cheap drinks as before, because why change what works? And heads back to the game room, weaving expertly between clusters of drunk people. Keith already has the table set up by the time he gets there. It looks good, and Lance both hates and rebels in a little warm thrill that shoots straight through his chest at the sight of him, settling low and sensual in his gut. Because Keith, for lack of a better term, is hot. Like really hot. And the worst part? He's not wearing anything special. Just tight black jeans and hug his thighs and ass, tall boots that Lance wants him to curl stomp him with, a black v-neck t-shirt that's just tight enough to show the shape of his chest without clinging, and a simple red plaid shirt that hangs unbuttoned and rolled up to his elbows, showing off forearms that have Lance weak at the knees. He shouldn't be weak to forearms, yet here he is. When Keith had shown up at his door, a leather jacket thrown over the whole ensemble, hair wind swept and messy, Lance had felt lightheaded just looking at him. Ever since he has acknowledged his attraction to Keith, he feels like it's gotten worse, harder to ignore, affects him more. But that's okay, right? They agreed it was okay. Besides, he saw the way Keith's eyes moved slowly down his own body, a shade darker and hungrier by the time his gaze returned to his face. Ready to get your ass kicked? He asked, handing Keith his drink. He holds a pool cue with one hand, propped against the ground and leaning slightly into it as he sips his drink. His eyes glint dangerously at Lance over the lip of the plastic cup. When I win, you're buying me another drink. Lance lifts an eyebrow. And when I win, won't happen. Cocky. I like it. Keith flashes him a smirk that has Lance's insides threatened to liquefy before he turns to set his drink aside. They rock, paper, scissors for who gets the break. Lance wins, and he's proud of it. He's done rock, paper, scissors enough with his siblings over the years that he prides himself on being able to read his opponent. Keith calls it dumb luck. Lance just lifts his nose and takes up his position. Keith's watching him intently, and he's proud when he manages a good break and even sinks one of the balls. A good start. It goes downhill from there. It's not that Lance is bad at pool. Actually, he's pretty damn good. His neighbors had one growing up, and him and his siblings used to go over there and have tournaments with the other neighborhood kids. He won a few candy bars in his time. He's pretty good at aiming, at seeing the angles and coming with creative shots that are so outlandish that they are impressive as hell when they work. Unfortunately, Keith is just better. When he sinks the 8 ball and Lance only has half of his own balls down, he straightens, plants the bottom of his cue on the floor, and smirks across the table at Lance. He glares, lips pursing dangerously, into pout territory. Rematch, you're on. This time, Keith breaks. And yeah, it's a good break, but nothing sinks. Lance is determined to win, or at least keep up. His pride is on the line, so he's not above playing dirty. He gets his opportunity when he notices a very tiny little detail. Keith staring at his ass whenever he bends over the table. He's subtle about it. Lance will give him that. Just a casual flicker of the eyes whenever Lance goes to line up a shot. Just happens to position himself to Lance's side or slightly behind him. Lance might not have noticed at all if it hadn't been for the very obvious snap of his eyes back to Lance's face whenever he turned to look at him, or the slight darkening of his cheeks. Keith's blushy, cute, and Lance milks it. He bends a little more over the table and takes a little longer to line up shots, pops his ass in just the right way, suddenly thinking past Lance for deciding to wear his ass jogging jeans. He takes to straightening slowly, with the subtle body roll that's entirely unnecessary, and shooing Keith slide smirks over his shoulder. Keith lights up like a fire engine, and it's the best goddamn thing ever. He starts taking more complicated shots, the ones that require him to sit on the table, shoot behind his back, stretch his long legs out for balance. He's flexible and he knows it. Now Keith knows it too. He also knows that he's probably gaining some extra attention around the bar, but he can't bring himself to care. He has Keith's attention, and that's all that matters, really. It doesn't take long for Keith to catch onto his game. He gets his revenge. Turns out Keith's ass looks great when he bends over, too. But it's more than that. There's a glint of determined fire in his eyes. The way he looks over the table to choose his shot. The way he stares when he's lining it up. The cute way his tongue peeks out to press against his bottom lip. The sharp perfection of his hit. The smirk that curls his lips when the shot goes well. The way his body seems to roll when he straightens, a coil of muscles, a predatory shifting that seems so completely unintentional. It has Lance feeling weak at the knees. If he sits on the table a little more often to keep them from buckling and throwing his ass to the ground, well, that's that. Lance is sure that Keith entirely knows what he does to him, and he's kind of grateful for that. Keith ends up winning, and this time Lance isn't even surprised. He isn't, however, ready to be done. So he gets another round of drinks while Keith sets up for a third game. This time Keith gets bolder, confidence running on a high. Or perhaps it's the rum that's giving him some liquid courage. Either way, he gets touchier. It's subtle. Nothing big. Gentle pushes when others are trying to walk past Lance. A touch at his shoulder or lower back whenever he maneuvers around him. But the touches linger just a moment longer than they should. Fingers brushing across him as Keith pulls away. He might not have noticed if he wasn't so fully aware of him. If he wasn't so wholly tuned into where Keith is at all times. Where he moves in the crowded room. If his skin didn't buzz and crackle in energy every time Keith comes close. Oh God. He's got it back. He's he's so. Oh, that's an interesting idea. No, not yet. Wait, maybe. Keith straightens after sinking the 8 ball, and Lance tries not to dwell on the roll of his shoulders or the flex of his arms as he leans against his cue, shooting Lance a dangerous smirk. Not a word, Kogani, he says, holding out a finger, fixing him with a stern frown. Keith's whole bad boy demeanor crumbles as he giggles, ducking his head to hide a smile, holding onto the cue a little harder and leaning into it to hold his balance. Cute as. Okay, new game plan, Lance says, moving to take Keith's pool cue, then put them back on the rack, stepping aside as another group swarms the table to claim it. We're going to play darts. Keith blinks, eyes wide, and face adorably blank. Darts? Yep. He takes Keith's hand, hard jamming up into his throat as Keith reflexively intertwines their fingers. Why? Lance hugs him through the room, weaving between groups to the dartboards. He sets Keith up in front of one. Because my pride is hurt, and I need to impress you. You don't need to impress me, he says it so casually, so innocently, a reactionary thought instead of that intentional. Looking up at him with an expression that's far too open and relaxed, Lance is leaning that drunk Keith has far too few walls. God, this boy is going to be the death of him. Yes, I do. Now, you make sure no one uses this dartboard. I'm gonna go get darts. He pauses, eyeing the empty plastic cups that they had left across the room. And more drinks. I can buy them this time. Nope, I got this. He pats Keith on the head, a ruffle of his hair that meant to be friendly. He blames the fog cup for his hand trails down, fingers trailing down his face, across his cheek, before hooking under his chin. He swears he's not in complete control of his body as he winks. Besides, you can pay me back later. He tells himself that he doesn't know what he means by that. Tells himself that he's just being playful, just joking. But Keith's cheeks flush all the same. Lance slips away from him before he can give into the urge to kiss him. He gets darts from the bar, as well as 2 more drinks, and makes his way back to Keith, feeling only slightly more wobbly than he had an hour ago. His limbs feel tingly and lighter, but he's still in control as the alcohol starts to set in. He's not fully drunk yet, but he's well on his way and feeling good. As he enters the game room, his eyes immediately find Keith, still standing where he had left him, but this time surrounded by a small crowd of drunk girls. All the walls Lance had seen down moments ago are up again. He stands, aloof and indifferent, arms crossed over his chest and eyes bored and slightly glazed as he idly turns toward them. They're talking, leaning far too close, but it doesn't look like he's listening. He looks instinctively uncomfortable, and Lance might have found it funny. But then one of them is reaching out, laying a hand on Keith's arm in a way that's far from innocent, and something ugly twists in Lance's gut, something dark and sickening, and far, far more vital than what he feels when Hunk talks about Shay. Hey, babe, he says, words slipping from him as he slides in behind Keith, holds a drink in each hand, spread wide on either side of him like a shield, forcing the girl's hand to retract. I'm back, he says as he leans forward, pressing an over-exaggerated kiss to Keith's cheek. He freezes, entire body stiffening. Lance can see his eyes go wide. He can feel the heat on his cheeks, but he doesn't pull away. Your drink, he says, curving the hand around Keith to hand him the plastic cup of rum and coke. Keith takes it robotically, pulling it in to nearly cradle it to his chest. Hand now free, Lance lets it settle onto Keith's waist, stepping a little to his side so his arm wraps around his back. Keith doesn't pull away. In fact, Lance swears he feels him leaning in just a little as he sips his drink. He holds up his other hand, brandishing his own cup as well as the darts clutched in his fingers. Keith nods, and they turn toward the ward. Lance spares a glance toward the girls. Some are sending him disappointed looks, but most look like they've already forgotten the encounter, already moving back to their own dartboard and their own table like nothing had happened. They back up with such little resistance that Lance thinks they probably assume Lance is Keith's soulmate or something. That lights up something strange and foreign in his chest. and he quickly stamps it out. Nope, no, not going there. Not touching that. Thanks, Keith says as they turn around, setting his drink on the tall table next to them. Lance shrugs, removing his hand from Keith's waist to set his own drink aside, lining himself up at the line in front of their dart board and lifting a dart. No problem. You look like you could use some help. He glances over his shoulder, a small smirk on his lips. Sorry about ruining your chances with them. He's not, but he says it anyway. Keith just shrugs. Not interested in girls. Then his eyes catch Lance, looking up through his lashes. There's the ghost of a smirk on his lips. Playful. Shy. I'd rather keep you company anyway. His voice is a low drawl, and it sends a shiver straight down Lance's spine. Lance turns back around and throws the dart. Bullseye. Okay. Yeah, I'm only gonna say it in few sentences. Lance and Key are having fun, having a couple of drinks, and they play some games. Yeah, that's all they do. But most importantly, the relationship, it starts to grow and grow. That's it. That's all I'm gonna say. Last chance. If you don't want to watch this part, you can skip this, and we'll get you back right into it. The night is cold, but for once, Lance doesn't care. Can barely feel it. His cheeks are flush, body warm, vodka creating the heat in his veins that keeps him going. The night air is a chill that he notices, but it doesn't truly sink in. It feels good. Feels right. Just like Keith's hand in his feels right. Just like Keith's hand in his feels right. Just like Keith's laugh mingling with his own sounds right. Just like how the way Keith's face catches the street lights, pale, cheeks flushed, eyes glistening, expression lifted with a smile looks right. They stumbled through the campus, tripping over their own feet at each other. They had to stop several times from laughing so hard, bent over, arms clutched around their middles. They hold each other up, lean on each other to keep from falling over, cling to one another despite the fact that it only makes their sense of balance worse. He doesn't even know why they're laughing at or how it started. He doesn't care, and he can't stop, doesn't want to stop. They only had a few more drinks over the past couple hours. He's drunk, but only just so. Just barely over that line from tipsy to drunk. Enough that motor functions are lacking. Keeping a steady thought process is hard, and he doesn't have complete control over his facial expressions. Despite his intoxication, he had kicked Keith's ass at darts, which hadn't been too hard. Keith's actually pretty bad at darts, and he looked hilariously offended when he realized this. Stared at the darts in his hands like they had personally insulted him. Lance didn't mind. It was good for a laugh, and it meant he got to get all up close and personal. Touch Keith with gentle and lingering fingers as he maneuvered him into the best posture where to put his arms. You live in the same dorm as Pidge, right? Keith asked, arm wrapping around Lance's waist to help him straighten up. Lance humps, lifting his head and turning it a little too fast. That once, he points, realizing a second later that he overshot and ended up pointing toward his neighboring dorm building. His finger wilts and frowns. Wait, no, that dorm. That one. Keith snorts. What's wrong with that one? They have a tiny room and never enough hot water. Now, carry me. What? He doesn't get to finish before Lance is moving away from him, stepping behind and putting his hands on Keith's shoulders. Before he has a chance to consider whether or not this is really a good idea, he's jumping. Thankfully, Keith is a lot more sturdy than he would be, though he stumbled several steps before regaining his balance. Lance, what the? He's laughing. Hands move automatically to hold onto Lance's thighs. They're warm through his jeans. Lance humps, wrapping his arms around Keith's shoulder and putting his head next to Keith's, nuzzling into the side of his head. My legs don't want to work, and I'm tired. Carry me up to my room. You're ridiculous. he says, but he's already walking. The first few steps are a little wobbly before he adjusts to the added weight, and the rest are just fine, if not a little slow. You like me anyway, Lance hums against his hair. You have no proof. The proof is in the fact that you're carrying me, Keith hums. Lance can feel it rumble in his throat against his arm. It's nice. Keith is nice. Keith also smells nice. All spicy and earthy and just, well, Keith. When they reach the doors into his dorm, it's a struggle for Lance to scan his card and for them to reach the door before it locks again. It takes them a couple tries, and Lance nearly falls off Keith's back twice, but he's determined to stay on, and Keith doesn't try to let him go. When they get through, they earn a small amused smirk from the RA on duty at the front desk, Lance saluting him from his perch on Keith's back as they wait for the elevator. To the left, he says as they step out onto the floor, directing Keith to his door. It's pretty obvious which one is his. There are handmade names on their door courtesy of their RA. Beneath them is a whiteboard with a doodle of Lance and Hunk courtesy of himself. Keith snorts a short laugh at it while Lance attempts to unlock the door from his spot on Keith's back. It's a struggle, but he finally gets it. Keith pushes the door open with a foot, stepping into Lance's space. Well, his and Hunk's space. Technically, he takes a quick look around, sees the beanbags on the floor, and steps over to them before turning and promptly dropping Lance onto one of them. Lance falls with a squeal, landing with limbs spread every which way, and glares up at Keith with a pout. He laughs, and Lance can't really bring himself to be mad. He ignores Keith chuckles as he struggles out the beanbag, body and limbs not quite working with him as smoothly as they should. When he finally manages to get to his feet, he stumbles to the door, tripping on a discarded shoe and falling into the door to close it. He eyes the light switch for a moment, lips pursed and brows furrowed, before deciding against it. Fluorescent lights? No thanks. Instead, he turns, carefully but not quite gracefully picking his way across the room to his desk. He probably should have picked up somewhat, but he hadn't really had time. He had been more concerned in getting himself presentable, and the room didn't get much attention before Keith arrived. When he reaches his desk, he fumbles the switch for a second before his lamp turns on. He blinks against the silent light, looking away and waiting for the gray dot to disappear. He turns, leaning back against his desk, hands propped up on it on either side of him. With just his desk lamp, the room is bathed in a soft yellow light, just bright enough to give everything definition and an aura of warmth without being too much and too blinding. It sends shadows stretching in the corners, not so much erasing the light but embracing it. His room isn't big, but it's definitely not bad for a dorm room. They have their wardrobes lined up on one wall, mostly out of the way. Sizable desk, a small set of drawers, each that they use as tables of sorts, one of which holds up their TV and assorted game consoles, bean bags in the center of the floor. Their beds are against another wall, bunked up to give them more space, and because Hunk always wanted bunk beds growing up, and hey, Lance isn't gonna say no to bunk beds. With his siblings, he fights over the top bunk, but he let Hunk have it easily. The way his face lit up when Lance said he could sleep up top was heartwarming and worth it. Keith stands in the middle of his room, turning slowly to take it all in. He looks at peace here, in a dim lighting of Lance's space. Shoulders relaxed, expression open, eyes wide and slightly glazed, lips relaxed enough to part just slightly, cheeks still flush. He stands out, dressed in black and leather, doesn't quite fit into the combined style and vibe of Hunk and Lance's room. Looks like he belongs more in a bar, or a high-class apartment, or an art exhibit late at night just before they close, more at home in a coffee shop, surrounded by dim lighting and sunken into a worn leather couch, or a concert hall with flashes of colored light briefly lighting his face and casting shadows, smoke curling around him, or on the back of his bike, wind in his hair and a wild freedom singing in his veins. Not here, in Lance's room, where he puts on face mask and tries to learn to knit with Hunk and play his games and complains about homework. Not where he wakes up with killer bedhead and makes Hunk laugh until ramen comes out his nose. Yet at the same time, he fits perfectly. A puzzle piece Lance's hand realizes he's been missing as he shrugs off his jacket and tosses it to one of the beanbags. It looks incredibly natural, adding to their mess, jumping right into it instead of standing above it, as he rolls his shoulders while he looks around, and looks at ease here, at ease and pristine, a breathing piece of art, strange enough to seem out of place, but complementing a college aesthetic in a way that's stranger. Lance doesn't know how to feel about it, but his heart is already a step ahead of him, fluttering uncomfortably in sharp staccato, lodging itself in his throat and making his breaths come shallow. His fingers curl into the edge of his desk, blunt nails biting at the polished wood in an attempt to avoid reaching out to keep touching him, drawing him closer and out of that strange veil of otherworldliness until he's firmly planted in Lance's reality, tangible and fully immersed in the physical plane in Lance's room. Had Lance not been so intently watching him, appreciating the way the light warmed his pale complexion and shadows accented the sharp features of his face, he might not have noticed the moment Keith freezes. He tenses, entire body going stiff, shoulders rising just a fraction. Lance can see his face, but his body language is enough. His gaze follows Keith's line of sight and oh, oh, oh. Their bunk beds are tall enough that Lance isn't crammed into a tiny little space on his bottom bunk. He has plenty of room to sit up and stretch, and it's all around pretty comfortable. At touch, however, the wall of his little bottom bunk cave is full visible, and it's covered with photos, some printed on glossy photo paper, some on Polaroids, some printed on printer paper. They're stuck to the painted center block wall with tape and tack, overlapping at the corners, and with no actual rhyme or reason to them. They're not in neat lines and rows. They're not ordered from biggest to smallest. It's chaos, a mismatched collage, a cacophony of images, beautiful in the simplicity and cozy in the disarray. They're all pictures of himself, technically, but his face is rarely in any of them. He's not actually the focus or the point of the focus. The close-ups focus in on the Soulmate paintings, decorating his skin, painting throughout the years, on his legs, arms, chest, neck, all of his favorites. And there are a lot of them, some dating all the way back to high school. Picture appears worn on the edges and sporting small holes from the thumbtacks that used to hold them to a bulletin board. The dim lighting of his desk lamp doesn't really do the colors justice. It casts them all in warm hues, mixed with the shadow of the top bunk, but he knows the colors are there, bright and vibrant as new tattoos. Some might say that it's egotistical to have dozens of pictures of himself next to his bed, but honestly, he barely notices himself in the photos. The focus has always been the paintings, his soulmate's paintings, his soulmate's work. It just happens to be the canvas. Near the head of his bed are a few newer ones, printed on simple paper from the library printers, cut haphazardly and stuck into the collage of older works. A sleeve of fire and flame licking artistically up his arm, a galaxy creeping up his neck, colors dark and lightning, creating a void on the image of his shoulder and neck. Bright and vibrant hues of the setting sun on his forearm, a storm in sky, chaos of blues on his stomach, hands held nearby to display the chaos of paint there as well. Lance standing proudly with his hands on his hips, wearing short black athletic shorts and a blank tank top, grinning at the camera as yellow and gold ribbons decorated his limbs, neck, and face. His leg propped up and bent, displaying the artistic strokes and design of metal. Lance steps forward, balancing wobbling as he does so, mind reeling as he tries to settle it quickly. His vision is a little unfocused still, making everything look not quite sharp, not quite still. He stops next to Keith in the middle of the room, rubbing the back of his neck with one hand. It's kind of cheesy, but I like to take pictures of all the paintings my soulmate does, and he waves a hand at his bed. Put them on my wall? He doesn't know why he says it like a question. Doesn't know why he feels so goddamn nervous about it. He had said that he doesn't mind. It's not like they're pretending they don't have soulmates. They're both well aware of that fact. They never tried to pretend otherwise. So Lance has no reason to worry about the fact that his friend with benefits is looking at the work of his universe selected soulmate. But he is. He really is. They've been having such a good night, and Lance doesn't want the mood ruined. More than that, he hates that he's feeling self-conscious and guilty over something that's brought him so much comfort over the years. He sneaks a sideways glance, stomach twisting into knots as anticipation runs sour through his veins. But Keith isn't looking at him. He's staring at the collage on the wall, eyes wide, brows relaxed and raised just a fraction. His lips are parted, lax and soft, for how tense his body is. His face holds not a single wrinkle, not a single tense muscle. He looks beautiful. The lamplight throws most of his face into shadow, but Lance can see the flush on his cheeks, though he's unsure if it's the alcohol or the cold. His skin is smooth and perfect, freckles tiny dots of shadow on the bridge of his nose. But it's his eyes that catch Lance's attention, distant, unfocused, odd. He must sense Lance watching him because he turns, a distant glaze over those beautifully dark irises, pupils blown wide, framed so beautifully by elegant black lashes, dark hair falling haphazardly over his forehead, wind blown and crazed as it frames his face. Beautiful. Wild. His eyes dart around Lance's face as he turns to face him more fully, encouraged by the lack of an actual negative reaction. All he does is stare, eyes searching Lance's. Lance risks a smile, small and shy, feeling his own expression soften as his body relaxes, relief surging through him. Keith's eyes flickered down to the movement, hovered there for just a moment. The pink tip of his tongue darted out to lick his own lips. Then his eyes are on Lance again, and Lance feels his breath catch his throat. The distant haze is gone from Keith's gaze, leaving only sharp, focused clarity. Determined fire sparking deep within those dark pools, pulling Lance in, leaving him transfixed, caught, drawn in. Keith surges forward, gloved hands coming up to grab hold of his face, fingertips digging into his hair, holding tight to his jaw, thumbs on his cheeks. Then Lance is being yanked forward, lips crashing into Keith's warm, soft, wet, pliant but eager, pushing back against him, head tilting, searching. Both of them stumble, thrown off balance by the sudden movement, but neither of them willing to break apart. Lance's hands come up, grabbing hold of Keith's. They slip up his arms as their balance rightens, moving around his sides to wrap up around his back, pulling him close. Keith makes a noise, high-pitched and needy and desperate, and it sends Keith spiraling straight through him. He tilts his head, taking control of the kiss, tongue sweeping out across Keith's lips, plunging in when he lets him in. One gloved hand wraps around his neck, fingers digging into the short strands of his hair and holding on tight, making Lance gasp. The other side's lower, over his collarbone, clutching at the fabric of his shirt. Then Keith is moving them, pushing at Lance, legs stepping against his own, forcing him to stumble backwards, lips locked and eagerly moving against one another. When the back of his knees hit the bed, he falls, retaining just enough presence of mind to duck in a practiced manner to avoid hitting his bed on the top bunk. His grip on Keith maneuvers him, turning his fall, keeping both of them safe as they fall without grace to his school-sanctioned mattress, into his messy disarray of blankets and pillows. They shift, getting comfortable, ignoring the elbows and ribs and the knees digging the thighs, never once letting the other move far enough away to break their kiss. When Keith strains for a moment, pushing himself up to adjust, Lance leans up at him, chasing after him, unwilling to let him go. Then they're sinking back together, two pieces falling softly into place, a sigh escaping them both as Keith sails over him, straddling one of his legs, elbows framing his face as they kiss. Lance's hands roam freely, fearless, with the alcohol still humming pleasantly in his veins, encouraged by the small soft sounds that escape Keith's lips. Hands slipping beneath the hem of his shirt, rising up the trail over his back, splaying wide to feel the dip of his spine and the ridges of his ribs. Moving to the front to let fingertips trace lean, defined muscles, thumbs experimentally, trailing over nipples and smiling into the kiss as Keith jerks. Keith bits his bottom lip in retaliation, and Lance lets out an embarrassingly loud groan, feeling Keith's smile press against him. He digs his fingers into Keith's hair and presses their mouths together hard, locking a leg over Keith's hip to roll them over, both on their sides, facing each other, with his arms no longer needed to hold him up. Keith's hands explore, pushing up Lance's t-shirt, fingertips and leather-clad palms moving over the heated, sensitive skin of his chest, his side, his stomach, skidding teasingly past the hair trailing down from his navel. He gasps, muscles twitching and jerking beneath Keith's touch. He leans into him, and Keith's hands slide to his back and their bodies begin to roll together. A jerk of his hips, both of them wedging thighs between the others. His movement is chaotic, tandem, trying frantically to find a rhythm and pace together, both of them chasing what feels good, both of them desperately trying to pull the same from the other. They pause long enough to wrestle shirts off, Keith growling at the fabric of Lance's struggles, tonguing it roughly over his head before diving back to reclaim his lips. Pressure cools low in his gut as their hips continue to rut, helpless and frantic, desperate and needy. He's never done this with someone else, but holy, does it feel good. He can feel Keith hard against his thigh, hear the soft gasps shared between their lips. Can't think, doesn't want to think, just want to feel Keith running against him, just as much a slave to it as Lance is as they chase the heat. Just wants to feel Keith's hands on him, tight grip and needy, nails carving lines into his back and arms. Wants to feel Keith's skin hot beneath his fingertips and lips. He wants to hear the sounds Keith is making, never wants them to stop, wants to swallow them down, wants to hear them louder. He doesn't know who moves first. Maybe they move at the same time. Suddenly, there are just hands between them, fingers fumbling over the buttons on their jeans and zippers that get caught, heels of hands pushing their pants down, shoving the waistband of boxers out of the way. He presses his forehead into Keith's, feeling the sweat there, the way their hair sticks together. Their noses touch, brushing together in a way that's far more intimate than it should be. Their lips don't touch, merely, however, barely brushing, breathing mingling. Gasps and soft whines shared in space between them. When Keith's hands touch him, hesitant at first, fingers light and grazing, Lance's breath hitches in his throat. He freezes as Keith pulls back, resists the urge to lean after him as he leans away. But then Keith's teeth are biting into the leather of his glove, pulling up roughly, eyes locked on his. He's not proud of the high-pitched whine he makes, but it makes Keith smirk as he tosses the glove aside. Dark irises smolder as he leans back in, forehead sticky and slick as they press together, the close brush of their noses making shivers run down his spine. Then Keith's hand is on him, pulling him out of his boxers, fingers skilled and deft and barely hesitating before wrapping around him, palm hot against his sensitive flesh. His breath hitches again before the air leaves his lungs in a rush, rumbling past his vocal cords to make a deep groan. He presses forward, nuzzling into Keith, catching his lips in a few tugging, lazy kisses. He wasted no time reaching for Keith, pushing the waistband of his boxer brief down to free him, wrapping his fingers around him, and Keith's resounding moan shoots straight through him. His eyes roll into his head, eyes squeezed shut, lips parted as he pants. Lance keeps his eyes slitted but open, unable to look away, unwilling to let a single moment of Keith's expression go to waste, wanting to see it all. Their hips jerk, bodies moving together in a relentless rhythm, uncoordinated and desperate. Their hands moving together, struggling to keep time with each other. He's never touched someone else like this before, so it goes with what's familiar. What he knows from touching himself. Turns out it works. Fingers deft and quick on Keith, thumb brushing across his head. Heat coils in his gut, tight and thrilling, building, tense, pressure, pushing more and more. His movements get sporadic, spread coming in sharp pants, mixing with Keith's. Then his hips are jerking, spinning out over Keith's hand, body short and long, low groan escaping his lip before he searches for it, cutting it off by capturing Keith's lips. A moment later, Keith is following him over the edge, kids uncoordinated and sloppy as their bodies shudder against one another, coming slowly down from their high, relaxing with sign into Lance's bed, slumping together on the blankets, heads falling away far enough to see each other, but still close enough to feel each other's breaths, bending out across their cheeks. Lance doesn't want to move, but Keith doesn't seem to be in a big hurry to do so either. His eyes search Keith's face, taking in the sheen of sweat, the way his wild hair sticks to his skin, the way his collarbones and chest heave with every breath, dark eyes lit and pupils blown, cheeks flushed and lips wet, swollen and red, his skin cast half in shadow and half glowing with the warm light from his desk lamp. Lance has art strewn across his wall, but in that moment he thinks Keith is the most beautiful thing in his room. And while still bathing in the afterglow, body warm and veins humming in endorphins, limbs tingling and muscles lax with echoes of pleasure that still linger, can't bring himself to feel guilty for that thought. Let's just say one thing. Yeah. They're going at it now. They're going at it. So I'm gonna say, they're really going at it now. And, they're in for it. Yeah. That's it. I can't say anything else, but, yeah. You know where this part goes. Alright. Let's continue on, shall we? Keith has never lived in dorms, but he learns pretty quickly that they're actually a terrible place to get a good night's sleep. His apartment isn't as quiet as his grandparents' house, but the occasional bump and voice and music and door opening from his neighbors isn't that bad. Lamb's dorm, however, is busy. Noises throughout the night, footsteps, voices, doors, toilets flushing, music, it all echoes in the halls. He ended up waking around 5 in the morning needing to pee. He got halfway out of bed before he remembered that he had never put his glove back on, and had a moment of brief panic while he tried to remember Lance seeing the faint words on his palm. He was fairly sure he hadn't. It hadn't been dark, and they hadn't been distracted. He found his glove with minimal struggle and stumbled out into the brightly lit hallway, still feeling the effects of the tail end of his buzz and the heavy blanket of sleep weighing him down. He managed to find the hall bathroom without much trouble, but ended up staring in bewildered confusion as Guy in the hot dog costume came out of a stall, gave him a small salute, and left. College is weird. Lance ended up following him into the bathroom with his toothbrush and toothpaste in hand. He caught Keith as he was leaving and forced him to brush his teeth. When he tried to protest, Lance gave him a deadpan look and said, "Keith, we've already swapped saliva. Now you use my damn toothbrush because I'm not waking up to you having morning breath and rum breath." So Keith ended up sharing a toothbrush with Lance in his floor's shared bathroom, both in nothing but their boxers. At 5 in the morning, half asleep, still slightly drunk, and unintentionally making Lance laugh as toothpaste dribbled down his chin. When they got back to his room, they both crawled back into Lance's bed, kicking off nearly half the cluster and blankets and pillows when their combined body heat became too much. Lance teased him heavily about being too emo take his gloves off even in bed, but Keith didn't budge. Sleep took him quickly after that. Sleep didn't last. Being a light sleeper in a dorm isn't a great experience. He hears doors start to open and close far too loudly, and echoing through the halls. He notices it pulling him out of sleep just barely before he drops back in, curling tighter around Lance and burning his face between his shoulder blades. He hears voices that intrude in on his fuzzy, disjointed dreams, not quite making sense but piercing through anyway. Why people are so active on a Sunday morning, he'll never know. It's nearly 1 in the afternoon by the time he gives up trying to sleep. He lies on his back in Lance's bed, light peeking through the blinds on the dorm window, lighting the room in a hazy shade of daylight. His phone sits by his pillow, useless and dead, having gone black screen shortly after Keith checked the time. Lance curls into his side, one leg thrown over Keith's, one arm curled into his chest, and the other tossed lazily over Keith's stomach. His head rests on Keith's shoulder, mouth open as he drools onto his chest. Keith can't bring himself to care. He has one arm wrapped around him, fingers idly running through the short strands of his hair, scratching idly with his scalp, and loving the way Lance curls into him just a fraction more. Something strange runs through him as he looks at the wall next to Lance's bed. Something warm and tingly and uncomfortable. Not unpleasantly uncomfortable, just foreign and odd. Like his insides are shifting and tightening, unable to be still, clenching in a way that makes his stomach flip and his lungs squeeze. He hasn't thought about what his paintings look like on Lance until recently, and this is a lot. Some of these he recognizes from high school. Some of them are from last year, from a couple months ago, from the summer before he moved out here for school. Just fractions of Lance's body, decorated with Keith's paint, appear on his skin like the color was made to be there, fresh and bright. In a few where Keith can see Lance's face, he's smiling, bright and brilliant, small and fond, distant and odd. He recognizes all of them. Each of these paintings has a place in his own notebooks, copied and drawn after he's put them on the skin. A poor duplicate done on paper so it doesn't forget. So he can't remember the art that he's done, so he has a version of it after he'd washed it from his skin. He's never thought to take pictures like this. He never even imagined his soulmate would. He never expected to find them displayed proudly on Lance's wall, let alone the safe. Intimacy is watched over his bed. He doesn't know how he feels about it. He's feeling a lot of things, and very few of them make sense. His heart's a mess, and his head is worse. Seeing Lance's soulmark wall is very overwhelming, but he can't look away. He thinks he likes it, but that doesn't stop it from being a little too much right now. So he tries not to think about it, tries not to think about a lot of things. Instead, he just focuses on the feeling of Lance pressed up against him and how he feels right now, in this very moment, where they're not soulmates. They're just Keith and Lance. Lance and Keith. Before it can spiral too much, Lance stirs, drawing him out of his thoughts. He shifts, lifting a hand to rub his eyes as he leans back, shifting away from Keith to lean into the pillow. When he opens his eyes and blinks, his eyes are lidded and hazy. His gaze settles on Keith, searching his face. He doesn't look surprised to find them there, so that's a good sign. He doesn't, however, look like he's entirely awake, which is only accented by the soft, dopey smile that curves his lips. He reaches out, touching Keith's cheek with gentle, uncoordinated hand, fingers running lightly over his cheeks, his jaw trailing down his neck and over his collarbones to rest his hand on Keith's chest. "You're soft," he says, words slurred with sleep and lips barely moving, voice low and hoarse. Keith finds that he likes it. He likes it a lot. Lance tilts his head further into the pillow, short hair a mess, sticking up everywhere and feathering out across the pillow. He grins, eyes half closed. "Soft like eggs." Keith snorts, entire body jerking with his sudden short laugh. He has to fight the smirk crawling onto his lips, but it's a losing battle. "Soft like eggs? Keith hums, eyes closed, then they open again, brows furrowing. His grin fades, replaced by a small frown. Wait, Keith laughs. It bubbles out of him, and he tries to cut it off, resulting in small bursts of chuckles, soft and under his breath. Lance's frown presses into a pout, and he leans forward again, burying his face on Keith's shoulder. His hand weakly slaps at Keith's chest. Shut up! I'm tired, and it's early. It's 1 in the afternoon. Early! The sound of a key fumbling with the lock has them both freezing. Lance shoots up onto his elbow, eyes wide, body tense. Keith faces next to him, eyes starting across the room to their door. There's a shadow of feet blocking a part of the light coming from under the door. The key slides into place. Their eyes met, wide and panicked. The lock tumbles, door handle turning. Suddenly Lance is grabbing him, rolling over him so he's on his side, near the room and shoving Keith against the wall, throwing blankets and pillows over him. As the door opens, Keith stills. Lance lays down, half pressed against him. Half sprawled out. Keith can't see him, but he's willing to bet he's laying the nonchalance on too thick. Hunk! Keith cringes as Lance's voice comes out just hair too high. Where are you doing back so soon, buddy? Dude, are you still in bed? Went out drinking with Keith last night. Don't want to get up. There was a hum of understanding. Hungover? Nah, just tired. How was Shay? There's a dream sigh, and Hunk's voice takes a noticeable tone. Amazing. She's so amazing, dude. I'm glad you have fun, buddy. Lance says, soft and sincere. There's a note to it that makes Keith's chest ache. There's shuffling in the room, a bag dropping to the floor, the sound of papers and bags being moved, a zipper opening, more rustling. He sounds like he's in a hurry. Keith hopes he's in too much of a hurry to notice his clothes on the floor, or that maybe his clothes blend into the messy state of the room. Anyway, I'll tell you about it later. I'm going to meet Pidge in the library. Homework already? Yeah, we got a project to do tomorrow. Ouch! Hunk laughs. Tell me about it. Wanna come? Get some coffee and bagels on the way? Nah, I'm good. I've got, stuff to do here. Yep, stuff. Just things and stuff. He chuckles, but it sounds far too strained to be natural. Keith reaches out to him, moving slowly beneath the blankets. Lance jerks at his touch, but relaxes as Keith's hand slides up and down his back, soothing and calm. Okay then. Hunk doesn't even sound bothered by it, confused but unbothered. He supposes living with Lance makes you used to occasional weirdness. Keith hears him lift his bag, the sound of it sling over his shoulder, to bounce over his back. Well, text me if you want to come by, and I'll tell you where we are. Yeah, will do, buddy. Later, man. Footsteps. Door opening. Closing. Footsteps getting fainter down the hall. Lance heaves a sigh, making the entire bed shift with it. Then he rolls over, lifting the blankets just enough to peek beneath. Keith glares up at him, lips pursed into a small frown. He can feel the way his hair is sticking everywhere. Mused and staticky. Lance grins, small giggle escaping him. Keith scowls. Sorry, you're just... Oh my god, Keith, your hair is a mess. Keith giggles again, and Keith ignores him as he pushes the blankets back, finally able to breathe fresh air. He sits up, letting the blanket pull at his waist, running his fingers through his hair in a poor attempt to fix the mess. He cringes at the spark of static. Lance sits up next to him, arms slipping around his waist as his chin comes to rest on his shoulder. Keith tilts his head to look down at him, but Lance keeps his head turned down. Hey, sorry about that. He sounds shy of all of a sudden, bashful, but it's such a strange 180. Sorry about what? Keith asks, and when Lance risks a glance up at him, Keith stares at him blankly. Lance brows furrow. You know, the whole thing with Honk? Hiding you? Oh, before he really gets a chance to say much more, Lance is already rambling. 'Cause, you know, we haven't really talked about whether or not we're going to let our friends know about our, arrangement, but we haven't so far, and we've kind of been hiding the kissing thing. So I figured that applied to this too, and Lance, Keith says, firm and sharp. He feels Lance winds against him, and he says, "It's not a big deal. I get it," he says, voice softer. "Yeah?" Lance glances up through his lashes, looking too damn good for his own damn good. "Yeah," Keith says, voice pitched low, loving the way he can feel Lance shiver against him. He turns then, leaning into Lance, and Lance follows his head, laying back on the bed while Keith comes down next to him, at his side, but half hovering over him. "I'm okay keeping this just between us." He lowers his head, hovering over Lance, close enough that his hair brushes against Lance's cheeks. Lance stares at him, eyes lidded and pupils blown. Keith lifts a hand, casually, trailing his fingertips along Lance's collarbone, tracing it for a moment before moving his fingers lower. Lower, drawn, lazy circles as he goes. Lance's back arches, breath hitching softly. He lifts his chin, just a fraction, just enough that it puts their mouths that much closer. He can feel Lance's breath on his lips. "Yeah?" A question. "Yeah, I promise." Keith leans down, closing that short distance between them. "You're out of the clan's trance." See? You don't get that rhyme? Okay, so yeah, basically it's all about clans now, and they have to keep them a secret about their, being each other's soulmates, but they gotta keep them a secret, not to tell that they are, in fact, each other's soulmates. Yeah, that we weren't expecting, and we knew about it, but they said they're gonna keep it a secret, so, okay. Can't tell anybody about it. But, that's not, it's a more of an ironic thing to us, because we know what's going to happen. But, they're gonna keep themselves secret. After all of that, soulmates talk and all funs and games, and they ended up, you know, more of a definition of a fun, well, into the next level, I'm gonna say. Because I'm gonna have to find another way to just say something clean so that I don't want to get demonetized on YouTube saying some of the body parts, or I don't want that to happen. But you know what? I don't care. I can say whatever I want. So, F yourself. Okay, that's it right now. I'm the end of chapter 7. Maybe we'll see what happens after they kept their promises about this soulmate thing. So yeah, that's it. I'll see you guys next time for chapter 8. So, alright, I'll see you.